Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, notice of this meeting was given on December 15th, 2017. The meeting will convene at 6:30 p.m., and visitors may obtain a request to be heard from staff for any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, the request to be heard forms must be submitted to the secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reordering at the discretion of the board president, so please attend the entire meeting to ensure you're able to hear any discussion. Absolutely. Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, the next meeting of the Board of Education of Douglas County School District 0001 will be held on Monday, January 8th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. Again, that's January 8th because we will not be meeting on New Year's Day. The meeting will be in the board meeting room of the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cumming Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the board meeting room on the north wall. Please stand and join us as Andrew Marcoux, a sixth grader from Harrison Elementary, comes forward to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Andrew. Vice President Snow will now lead us in the OPS vision and mission statement.
I would begin with the vision. Every student, every day, prepared for success, and the mission. Omaha Public Schools prepares all students to excel in college, career, and life. Excuse me.
Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Cassidy.
Here.
Godding.
Present.
Hallman.
Here.
America.
Present.
Perlman.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Scanlon. Snow.
Here.
7 present.
And I know Mr. Scanlon has let us know that he sometimes is running late for the second board meeting of the month, so I would entertain a motion to excuse his absence in case he does not make it.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second. Oh.
Okay, motion by Mr. Snow and second by Dr. Holman. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Godding.
Aye.
Hallman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
7 aye.
Motion passes. We will move on to our OPS Proud Spotlight and Mrs. Monique Farmer.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board and Superintendent Evans, our OPS Proud Spotlight tonight is on Wilson Focus School. Wilson was recently named an Apple Distinguished Program for 2017 to 2019. The Apple Distinguished Program designation is reserved for programs that meet criteria for innovation, leadership, and educational excellence, and demonstrate Apple's vision of exemplary learning environments. The Apple Distinguished School Program is by invitation only for schools that meet the current program qualifications. Recognition is for 2 years, and it has an opportunity for renewal each invitation period. Wilson has been designated as an Apple Distinguished Program since 2012. We salute students, teachers, and staff for their achievements, and at this time, I would like to welcome the principal of Wilson Focus School, Brett Anderson, to the podium.
Thank you. I was hoping to have some kids tonight, but I think they're all in their pajamas at home getting ready for tomorrow since we start so early. I do have some staff, though. If I could have the Apple reps come up, I think it's Brent and Brent.
Easy to remember.
I didn't plan that.
But he's Brett, so it's...
Thank you, Brett. Good evening, Madam President, Superintendent Davis, and members of the board. It's my honor tonight to be here to recognize the work of Wilson Focus School. The young lady that spoke pretty much stole my thunder on some of the things that I'm usually say in the realm of what's happening. But today I got to come visit the school and meet Brett in person for the first time. I'm actually born and raised in Omaha, so I live in Kansas City now, but I love Nebraska and love Omaha, so it was fun for me to come back home and and get a chance to go to a school that is in the OPS school district to see what great things are happening with the utilization of Apple products. And it's really the work of the staff and Brett that the recognition comes from. And so it's my honor tonight to recognize them for that, for the innovation things that they're doing at the school with our products. And we really value innovation in learning. And it was obvious in my short visit there this afternoon that some really great things are happening, and they're collaborating with other great school leaders and people across this area as well as the country. And so that is very fun for me. This is a fun night to recognize great work of the staff. And so you guys are doing awesome things. Keep up the great work, and I'm excited to connect with them in the future and support the work of Wilson. So we have a plaque that basically recognizes the school for continuous innovation in learning, teaching, and the school environment. And as the young lady mentioned, it's for 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. And then we also have a banner. So I don't know if the staff would like to come up perhaps, and we can hold the banner, and we'll hang this up in the school along with their other distinctions from the past. So congratulations again to Wilson Focus School.
I just have to say, I think it was John Wooden that said the main ingredient to a great team is the staff itself, and this is definitely a team too. This is a great team. We've got a great team of kids, and I was hoping to have some kids here. So I'm going to have to show this on the morning news, and we'll have the kids brag about it and show it, because it's fun for the kids to see and see what they've done, because they're the ones that have made this happen, that's for sure. Yes.
Again, congratulations, Wilson. I think you are a gem on your little corner of 52nd-ish and F, which is just on my side of the street in Sub-District 8. So, sorry, Ms. Ryan. We will move on then to our board and superintendent communications. And first up is Connie Kanoki with the Treasurer's Report.
On the financial statements, I just thought I would point out to you on page 13 of the financial statements for the district, it shows the general fund operating expenditures, and it shows what our total budget is, what we've received so far, and then what's left to be received or spent. So to date, this is the second month of our fiscal year. It began September 1, and now this financial statement is as of November 30th. We've taken in $101 million in revenue, and our expenses are $135 million. So we have we had to use some of our fund balance this month to make up for it, and our tax collections fluctuate throughout the year, so that's to be expected, and that's why we do keep a fund balance. So just if you're ever wondering where we're at financially, that's what you can look at on the financial statements. That's all I have.
Okay. We'll move then to superintendent report and Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple of updates to the board and community. We have had, unfortunately, several funeral services for 3 staff members that we lost in the last 2.5 weeks. Tom Dickey from South High, Michelle Ricard from North High, Corey Meyer from Druid Hill. So a very difficult time for those schools, for those students, the staff, the families of the individuals, and kind of an unusual time to have that many losses and tragic losses. So just keep those schools and families in your thoughts and prayers. And also I wanted to mention a couple of things. We had our principals meeting, monthly principals meeting last week, and I know that tonight we're going to be hearing from our auditor. I also know we're going to be hearing from the Nebraska Investment Council, and for the board's information, the public's, as a result of investment returns that haven't been as high as we'd like, our unfunded liability has grown, and we are going to have a community/staff/board committee that starts in January to come up with a $15.8 million shortfall. And so I wanted the board to know that we'll be asking you to identify a couple of community members that you would like to be on this committee. We'll have staff representation, OEA representation, as well as multiple other groups. We want it to be cross-sectional to see, one, how we spend money today, and two, where the cuts could come from that are the least impacting on students. So I wanted the board to be aware of that. I know we've talked about it before, but now that time's almost upon us, and I thought it was appropriate to talk about it tonight because we're going to be talking about the audit of OSERS. We're also going to be talking about investment returns with Nebraska Investment Council, so I thought it might be well to have that as we head into these other conversations. And just as another note, on a really positive note, we had a team from the Nebraska Department of Education visit Druid Hill Elementary last week, and I participated in a couple of interview sessions with them. They are following up on the priority school status that Druid Hill had been in, identified 2 years ago, and then was removed this last fall. They're going to have a report from, it's actually a third party working with Nebraska Department of Ed, but I am quite confident that they're going to have more glowing responses on where they're at today, and they'll have a report to the state board, so I'll let you know when that date occurs, but I don't see anything that the review team or anyone else that was doing the analysis, all I see actually is just continued progress. So I think we're going to hear that from the review team, and we'll bring that back to the school board as soon as that's done. And I thank you for the opportunity to provide the update, Madam President.
All right, we'll move on to board member reports. And are there any board members that would like to share updates or happenings? Mr. Snow?
I love Mr. Ray's facial expression when I raise my hand. Thank you, Madam President. I had an opportunity to attend, go to Metro Fort campus for an event hosted by Partnership for Kids with their high school students. They had some players from Nebraska that played for Nebraska football years before modern day. They also had some community leaders there, and we spoke to about 200 students. And the reason why I don't remember their name, but we spoke to about 200 students there, talked about empowering them, looking into their future, and I just want to congratulate Partnership for Kids and Metro Community College for hosting that event for those students to actually be on a college campus and see the expansion that venue has for them in the future. I also had the opportunity of attending Lothrop's after-school program, which is hosted by the Nebraska for Civic Reform and Collective for Youth, and had an opportunity to visit with the students and the staff there. And it's always good to go into a renovated school when they have a new after-school partner. The principal's excited, the teachers are excited, and you can see that on the students and the parents' faces as they come into the doors. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I just want to say good luck on finals to all of our students that are taking them this week, and I hope everyone enjoys their winter break, and we look forward to seeing all of our students and staff back safely when we start school again up in January. We will move on then to public comment. Mr. Ray, do you have any additional public comment forms? Okay. We have one speaker who's submitted a request to speak form. Policy 8346 limits individual speakers to a maximum of 5 minutes. Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. And please make sure you spell your name and state your address. And our speaker is Mary McHale.
Good evening. I know this is getting to be a regular thing, so I know you're going to do the right thing so I can go back to my regular life. My name is Mary P. McHale, MC, capital H-A-L-E, and I live at 5009 Izard Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. And I thank the OPS School Board and members and OPS staff for all you do for the students of OPS. I'm here tonight to talk about the transition program. which has approximately 166 students in 3 locations who receive special education services between 18 and 21 years of age. The purpose of the transition program is to provide the students with job and life skills training. I thank you again for taking the time to do the research about the current transition program sites and for including it in your workshops. I also thank you for prioritizing this program in the top 6 items once all the workshops were finished. If the board votes tonight, which I know you're not going to, on what is included in the 2018 bond issue, I hope that a new transition program site for both PVA and Career Center is included in the 2018 bond issue. I know you will make the correct decision on what items are to be included in that 2018 bond issue, even though it'll be too late for my son as he will age out of the educational system in May 2019. I'm advocating for those students who will come after my son, who deserve to learn in a welcoming environment with the same learning conditions that the general education students have. I'm going to give a shout out. This week is Transition Spirit Week, and so all the transition programs are doing different themes all week. If you're interested in attending or going and seeing, I would urge you to call Mrs. Shauna Frodema. She would have the schedule, and she would be able to tell you what they're doing and at what sites, what day. Today was crazy holiday socks. I don't know. Friday is dress-up day. Something else is tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. So again, if you've never been there, never seen the students, go. It's a great opportunity. Every day, every student, every day, prepared for success. Make this statement applicable for all students. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We will move next to our consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is before us.
Before we do that, I would ask to remove one of the items to the regular agenda,
Okay, which item would you like to move to the regular agenda?
I-10.
Okay, Mr. Ray, can you make that change, please?
Point of order. I just want to make
Yes.
sure, I-9 is also not on the consent agenda in the list of items. I don't know if I'm not seeing it. Maybe, is everybody else seeing it? I don't see it in the blue, I see it in the black. Dr. Holman, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? I don't know if we just need to get it moved over.
Is that from what you just changed, Mr. Ray? Did it pull both of them?
I have mine in mind.
She's referring when you click on the I consent agenda and it has the list of items.
It's not in there.
It's not showing 9.
I just want to make sure when we vote, we're voting on everything in the list
Correct.
and not missing something.
It is definitely showing on the agenda. It's just not showing in that list on that item. Do we have to have it listed in the blue to be able to vote on it, or can we specify that we are voting as appears on the left-hand side?
So I-10's moved. Let me look at the new.
Ms. Neelis Brush? Or can we, if we vote on the consent agenda, are we approving the consent agenda as it appears in the individual items on the agenda, or the consent agenda where it is listed under item details? Or do we need to
I would
specify?
recommend whatever you're pulling, that you specify what you're pulling and that you specify.
We already moved that. The issue is there's one thing on the agenda listed on the left-hand side that is not showing up on the right-hand side, is what Ms. Scotting's referring to.
Could we just say, I approve the consent agenda I-1 through I-29, except for I-10?
I'd say except for I-10, which refers to X, Y, and Z, so that way it's clear
Okay.
that you are pulling what you intend to pull.
Perfect, thanks.
But
Well, but the new I-10 is a different I-10, because when we pulled I-10, it moved everything else up by one. So there's a new agenda item, which is J1C, which is the old I-10.
Or you don't even have to refer to I-10. My recommendation would be whatever you're specifically pulling, that you refer to that in the language so that there's no confusion.
So we would essentially, we'd need a motion to approve the consent agenda before us, with the exception of 2017-2018 compensation schedule for employee categories not under negotiated contracts.
Correct.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any abstentions on the amended consent agenda?
Just give me one moment, though.
Sorry, we are waiting to be able to record the roll call vote, so we have to pause to let it update.
All right, here we go.
Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Gadding.
Aye.
Hallman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Perlman.
aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. We are going to do items a little bit out of order just because we have some people from out of town. So we are first going to do item J2A, which is our Nebraska Investment Council introduction, with State Investment Officer Michael Walden Newman.
Well, good evening, Madam President, board members, superintendent. My name is Michael Walden Newman, and I'm the State Investment Officer with the Nebraska Investment Council. And I want to tell you that I am so pleased to be here tonight because in a week, we're going to have 1 year of managing the assets of the school employees of Omaha. And it's been an honor to do that for the past year. It was an honor for me personally to be part of the process that led to the transition of these assets from your OSER's trustees to the Investment Council. At the risk of telling you some things I assume you already know, I thought I'd cover who the Investment Council is, what we do, and most importantly, what we've done with your money since we've had those assets. But before I do that, I want you to understand that what has happened between the Investment Council and Omaha is something that's going to be happening to other plans across the country. And you all, and we as a partner, are leaders in that, in the merger of plans to affect efficiencies for the benefit of the beneficiaries. There are few programs that have meshed, I think, as seamlessly as ours have. And my personal experience and the first phone call I made was to Colorado, who merged into their state plan the employees of the city and county of Denver some years ago. But this process has been so smooth, and I want to first thank some of the people that were involved at the beginning in 2015. I had come from Wyoming in December of 2014. And a few weeks after I took my seat in Lincoln, I was invited to the state capitol and asked by the chairman of the State Retirement Committee if I thought the Investment Council was capable of taking over management of the assets of the Omaha plan. I wanted to be that can-do guy who was new in town, and I said, you know what? Yeah, I bet we can do it. And I bet we can do it. He said, do you think you're going to need more people and more money? I said, how about if we give it a shot first without? And then if we can't do it, we won't be bashful and we'll let you know. And what happened that first year in 2015 were a series of meetings that you all were involved with. Your in-house and outside legal counsel were involved with. Your then president, Ms. Gotting, was involved with, as well as legislators, myself, and legislative staff. We worked through a piece of legislation that the legislature, frankly, in its wisdom, and those of us involved as well, decided would be best left for a year to percolate, make sure we had all the kinks worked out, and then was set aside in 2015, brought up again in 2016, and as you know, was approved in the spring of 2016. One of the components of that was to develop a transition plan by July of that year between the Investment Council and Omaha. By then, you had hired Director Carter, and she and I worked out that transition plan and submitted it. Now, as I said, what is the Nebraska Investment Council? The council was set up in the late 60s by the state of Nebraska to consolidate investment activity into one standalone state agency. And it has done that these decades. Nebraska Investment Council means a couple of different things. The Nebraska Investment Council, first, is the 8-member board. 5 of those members are appointed by the governor. They have requirements for investment expertise. 3 of the members, and they're the voting members. 3 of the members are ex officio members and do not vote, but that doesn't diminish their role in the council in providing input. Nobody's bashful, and acting as a communication between the council and their representative constituencies. And those 3 members are, first, the state treasurer, who is the custodian of all funds for the state. The second is the director of the state retirement system. And then, as a result of the legislation approved last year, the director of the OSERS plan is also an ex officio member of the board. So Ms. Carter, Director Carter, is involved with the Investment Council. The Investment Council also is the name of the state agency. There are 10 of us. I've got the title of State Investment Officer. I'm the head of the state agency. And the other 9 members and I go to work every day solely thinking about the investments of the state. We handle, in addition to your $1.12 billion, we handle $25 billion. It's spread across 33 investment programs. We handle the investments for all of the retirement plans administered by the state of Nebraska. So the state's teachers, highway patrol judges, who enjoy a defined benefit program, state and county employees, and I'm sure you know this already, have a cash balance benefit program. We handle the endowments of the state, And we also manage the state's checkbook, which is about $3.5 billion, and we manage that in-house. The rest of the money is managed with external money managers. When we took over the management of your assets in December, in January of 2017, we had already spent those 6 months working on the transition plan so that by the time the new year ran around, we hit the ground running. We had already, we and I mean now the 18 of us, 17 at that time, council members, board members, and staff had developed an investment policy statement for the OSERS funds before they got to us, so we'd be ready to roll. It mirrors the investment policy and asset allocation of the state's plans. In other words, the long-term plan for your assets is the same asset allocation for the rest of the teachers of the state. What we have, of course, though, is we've inherited a plan with an asset allocation that was put in place for decades, over a century, with your plan that's going to take some transition time. When we received the assets in January of 2017, our next board meeting was in February, and at that time, we transitioned 2/3 of your assets to mirror the asset classes we could of the other plans, the other defined benefit plan. About 1/3 of your plan rests in assets that are illiquid, and they're just going to take some time to run off. We anticipate that the bulk will be off in 5 years, and there may be some that will last as much as 10 more years before the time that the Omaha plan will mirror in its asset allocation the plan for the rest of the teachers of Nebraska. We've had fantastic cooperation through your most recent audit from your auditor. You should know we manage a couple of different fiscal years. The state and county plans run on a calendar year. The defined benefit plans are like the state, and they run on a July 1 through June 30 fiscal year. And we know going into our new relationship with you that you all have your own fiscal year. And you'll hear from your auditor how that worked. From where I sit, it went great. But that's why you're going to have your auditor up here to find out for yourselves how the audit went. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I can tell you again that in this last now year, we've enjoyed a terrific ongoing relationship with the OSERS trustees. One of the obligations we have under the law is that we report performance to the trustees of the plan each quarter. So we provide performance reporting each quarter, and under an agreement with Director Carter to make it more efficient, 2 of those sessions are in person, face-to-face, and I was over here at the beginning of the month at the OSERS trustees meeting going through our performance reporting. I came hands-free tonight to field any questions. I wasn't planning to go through a performance report with you. Our point of contact is going to be with Director Carter and OSERS, and I know you all understand that as well under the revamped relationship that came with the implementing legislation. So any of that kind of information should be available directly from Director Carter and the OSERS staff. We do have, as the Investment Council, what I think is a terrific website. We redid it. I have been here 3 years. And it's one of the things that we started working on when I got here, was a revamped website to be more transparent. And I'd like you all to hop on at your leisure and validate for me that you think it's as great as I think it is. I'm going to brag a little because it actually won a silver medal in an international competition for website designs. The designers, quite frankly, were very patient with me because I was pretty persnickety about how I wanted it to look. And I told them, I said, when we get done with this, this thing's going to win an award and you're going to trample over me to run up and grab it. So I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of the staff. We have investment professionals. And again, to reinforce, that is what we go to work every day thinking about, is the beneficiaries of the plan. I'm a fiduciary for the plan. The 5 voting members are fiduciaries of the plans, and that we all take our responsibilities very seriously. So for you all, it's an honor, and I hate having my back, but you can raise your hands if you're in any of these plans, and I mean it. That's what we go to work every day to do, is watch out for your assets and make sure they'll be there, not just for the current participants, but for the folks that you're trying to hire and promising these benefits to. And I know you're thinking out as long-term as we are. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Mrs. Gadding.
Well, I think you're also maybe a little humbled too, because I think you recently received an award as well for being one of the top investment managers in the country. So
Right.
We're very, very, very thrilled to have you taking care of the money. Can you just speak?
I can feel my face heating up a little bit.
Well, we're thrilled to have you in charge. So,
Appreciate that.
can you just share a little bit about what PERB is? Because so we know the Nebraska Investment Council, but I want to make
Right.
sure the Board of Education clearly understands the differentiation between those two entities, because it's important as we, think about legislation and move forward that this board understands.
You bet. And it's not unique, because Nebraska isn't the only place where this is the situation. But it is definitely the minority of situations where you have an independent investment council charged solely with the investment program and staffed with investment professionals. Most times, my title happens to be State Investment Officer, but it's Chief Investment Officer. Most times, you'll find the Chief Investment Officer reporting to the Director of the pension plan. That's not the case. The Public Employee Retirement System, let's just call it the retirement system, is a separate state agency with their own director and their own board. We're both housed in the same building over in Omaha. They're across the hall. They're responsible for the administration of the plan. They get the checks out. They do audits of counties and school districts, et cetera, and do the administrative work. They have a board of at-large public members, and they have a board of constituent representatives on the board. I'm on that board as a non-voting member, just as the director of the pension is on our board as a non-voting member. So there's that communication tool, and I do quarterly reporting to them, and did it just this morning. They had their meeting today, and I did the quarterly report for them on investment performance, the same way I do it there. So they're a separate state agency. Does that answer the
That
question
does. I just
fully?
wanted to make sure everybody understood those, because sometimes you think about those roles being together, and so they're not in Nebraska.
That's cool.
I guess what I'd like to say is, I would like us as a just receipt of report to put on the quarterly report that you give out. I also want to compliment you and thank you on behalf of Omaha Public Schools for creating a separate section in the reporting that you do through the Nebraska Investment Council that is dedicated only to OSERs and separate from. So if I've looked at the last couple of quarters, and it's very helpful. I also am just thrilled to report that through September 30, and I think that's a calendar year number, right, third quarter, the return for OSERs was 9.5%, which is something better than we've seen in a while. So very excited about that, and have enjoyed watching that transition to mirror more of the state investment. So I think it's important that we, as a board, take a look at those quarterly reports and are aware of kind of what's happening, and it helps us to better understand it. So thank you for reporting that separately.
you bet.
Yeah.
I can answer more questions, or I can answer now a question you haven't asked yet about the money. I heard the superintendent talk about trying to cobble together $15 million. How about if I tell you what money you've saved by having the assets come to us? It's not a little, it's not a lot, but how about if I describe some of those efficiencies, if that's of interest? You represent 5% of our portfolio. It's everything to you, and that, I don't mean to say 5% is a small amount. It's everything to us because it's everything to the people, anybody who's participating in them. It's 100% of theirs, right? But what we do is we apportion those costs to you. We have costs as the investment council, my pay, keeping the lights on. You pay 5% of that. You pay 5% of some things that you used to pay 100% for. So that's real savings. You pay 5% of consulting fees. We have an outside investment consultant, not the managers I'm talking about, but the investment consultant who helps us track performance, vet managers, and prepares the performance report. You've gone from paying 100% for your own consultant to a share of our consultant. You've gone from paying 100% of your bank fees to paying a share of our bank fees. You've gone from paying 100% of manager fees when you had when those managers had solely your assets, to paying, where we've blended the assets, just your share of those management fees. And so that is real money. And that's beyond, we're talking about investment performance, which is difficult to compare right now, because the asset allocation is still young in the sense that we've just transitioned this year. But as Board Member Goding said, you've already seen some results, and we're going to see to it that you enjoy the investment results that we've seen at the Investment Council with the DB plan. I do know those numbers. I came hands-free, but I've got a little paper in case somebody wanted to know. I just didn't know if we needed to do it tonight, but I do know.
Well, I would just add to that, I took a look at the second quarter to look at the annual expenses. And of that, 2/3 of the money that you've invested, we're paying about $1 million in fees. Of that 1/3, and the numbers were a little bit higher than 1/3 when I looked at it, we're paying almost $6 million in fees. So it quickly tells you that movement to paying 5% from paying 100% is significant. And that's another savings that we'll see happen in the next 5 years once some of those private equity and other items, hedge funds, et cetera, shift off of the books.
And that goes to the asset allocation structure. We at the Investment Council just believe in paying active management fees where you're going to get, when it's worth it. We've just restructured the equity portfolio at the Investment Council to where, and you're a part of that, to where we have passive management. In other words, we're just buying the index, not to get in the weeds, but enough of the weeds, your weeds, where we're paying, buying an index for our U.S. stock exposure. We've changed to buying an index for our non-U.S. stock exposure, whereas before we were paying some active management. And when I talk about paying fees, we were paying 50 and 55 basis points, these are pieces of a percent, to active managers in the international space, and now we're paying 6 basis points. Because we don't believe in paying when you're not going to be rewarded with increased return for that, and instead have transferred those dollars to paying global managers who can have their expertise across U.S. and international. And again, it's a little bit more technical maybe for this evening, but trust me, one way to get good investment return is not paying more than you need to. We run the Investment Council DB plans for 33 basis points, and the average for plans our size is about 45 to 50 basis points, and you all, for your plan, were running about 66 basis points. So you'll see some savings, and those savings translate into the pockets of the beneficiaries for the long term. I don't want to overpromise. As I used to tell the kids when they cared what Dad said, you can't take credit for something when it's going well if you're not willing to take blame on the downside. So I don't want to get out over my skis, but this year's been good to investors, and we need to remember that, and when things aren't so great, that we're in it for the long haul. Ma'am, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Mr. Perlman?
Just have a few questions.
Sure.
Thanks for the work you do. You manage my retirement as a county worker, and things have been excellent. So I appreciate I'm part of MPERS.
Yeah.
Just in lay person's terms, can you describe the asset allocation for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so asset allocation, think of it as a big pie, right? And a big pie. And one of the charges, and the pie has wedges. And those are all the pieces in the building blocks. And you don't need a lot of wedges. But the building blocks for that pie that are going to take you where you want to go to meet your investment goals, whether they're personal or, in our case, for thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. And we want to have the right mix of asset classes, which are the name of each of those wedges, that are going to get us where we want to go. Now, the Investment Council's charge is based on risk first and then return. In fact, state law says that the Nebraska Investment Council is to manage the assets in its care in a diversified manner to protect against large losses, which is the best way to, that's the first investment rule, right, is don't lose the money. But that's laid out in state law. And so what that does for us is it keeps us in a fairly narrow band compared to peers of risk tolerance. So we're investing in asset classes that go up and down like this. And that pie is built with those asset class wedges that will move us along the path going like this. We're not the investor that's going to take the roller coaster that goes like this and hope that at the end of the ride we're where we want to be. We're just not that. So we have a very conservative asset allocation that has that's built-in protection of tight risk tolerance. What I've brought is, as the CIO of now 3 years, is a new way of examining that asset allocation, and I'll very quickly run you through it. I call it's a blank sheet review, and that is where rather than building the asset allocation little bits at a time, you take the whole thing at once, asset class by asset class. In other words, this equity review I was talking about, we didn't just look to see if we had some good managers or not. We stepped back and said, if we were building a stock portfolio today, what would it look like? And the board, that was part of the interview process with me. They knew I was going to bring that style to the job. And frankly, they had the belief in that they allowed me and the staff to bring that to them, that new approach. And so we have deconstructed and reconstructed the investment portfolio for the other, both the state and county and the other school teacher plans, to a new structure that we think is going to be more efficient and get us where we want to be. And so that's the asset allocation itself is right now, the mix is, and I can do that without looking at my tattoo, the mix is 27% U.S. equity, 11.5% non-U.S. equity, so everything but the United States, and 19% global, which can be anywhere around the world. Then we have about a 30% allocation to bonds. We have a 7.5% allocation to real estate. And this isn't going out and buying buildings ourselves. This is investing with people in funds that go buy buildings and property to manage. And a 5% allocation to private equity. Now, that is different, to say the least, from what the Omaha plan had and has. And over time, particularly in the alternative space. And so over time, we're going to pull down those alternatives in the Omaha plan to, as those investments roll off, they're illiquid, we can't get out of them. But we're going to let them roll off, and we're going to replace them with the allocation that I just described. Mr. Pullman, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I do have a few others.
Yep.
You know, the markets have really changed dramatically over the last 8 years, but specifically more acutely over the last 10 months, with the stock market being up 25%, benchmark
Right.
interest rates going from 0 for 7 years now to 1.5. Is that something that the Investment Council itself actively, I don't know if manages is the right word, but maybe, I guess my ultimate question is, how nimble is the council? How nimble does it ask the investment managers to be to take advantage of it? And maybe not even take advantage of it, considering its goals, but to work with the environment that's around it.
That's a great question, and it goes to one of the fundamentals, I think, of investment management, and certainly my style and the council's approach, and that is, again, to approach it from risk first and decide what risk appetite you have, how you want that roller coaster to be. You want a smoother ride, or are you willing to take the excitement, let's call it that, let's put a positive, and the excitement of that. And we're not the latter. So what we have is long-term return assumptions for each asset class. And they are long-term. They are 10 years and 30-year return assumptions. And we model the portfolio based on those long-term assumptions, not what's going on in the market. We look at manager performance. I'd like to think I know every day where the portfolio is because we watch. Do I care? And I care about it every day. But do we make decisions based on monthly investment performance? No. Quarterly investment performance? No. An annual number? No. 3-5-year numbers? Yeah. Now you're getting to where I pay attention to the returns. Because if you don't, if you're too short-sighted, then you begin to think that you're a little bit smarter than everybody else, and none of us is. And so what's going on right now, our portfolio is in place not for today's stock market, but for tomorrow's stock market, and we have the numbers we think that those returns are going to be. They're outsized this year, but the biggest example of that are people who got out of the market in 08, who watched that market in 07 ride up, and in 08 got scared and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save what money I've got left because I can't take the ride anymore. And what they did, if you sold in February and I was in Wyoming at the time, and my board the portfolio I managed were the elected officials of the state, the 5 statewide elected officials. I ran the mineral money for the state of Wyoming, and had some people in February of 09 say, you know what, when our portfolio was down just 13%, it was probably worse here, said, you know what, we need to sell it right now and save everything we've got left. And the poor folks who did that missed out the next year when the market went back up 75%.
It's up 400% since then.
And I think we all know folks, folks who made that call and slept better maybe for a while, and I don't, maybe not so much. But anyway, so we're in it for the long run, and we don't react. I grew up in Oregon, and we used to go deep sea fishing with my dad, and he used to say, if you don't want to throw up when the seas get choppy, you need to keep your eye on the far horizon. And I've repeated that. This isn't the first time I've said that in a meeting like this to keep people focused on far out. Again, for you all, you're thinking about people you're going to hire that are going to make a 30-year career in Omaha that you won't hire for 5 more years. That's who we're investing for, too.
Okay. One other question I have is, you mentioned earlier that about 1/3 of the assets that OSERS had are illiquid,
Yeah.
but should be liquid within the next 5 to 10 years.
We're hoping.
Are those already automatically under the authority of the investment council as they become liquid, or not?
Yes, that's a good question. And to make clear what I tried to say earlier about the structure, between July, when part of the transition plan that we put in place in July of 2016 was that we were going to make sure that all of the contracts were assigned to us from your assets during that interim, so that of January 1 of 2017, they were clearly ours. I didn't call it, we had some conversations in the fall, more between attorneys, and then folks got a hello call from me after the new year to say hello. I'm the state investment officer. Your investments are now with us. We're going to have you out to visit, and made a couple of calls made some calls to the folks who I said, it's been great. We're probably going to be saying goodbye here in the next month. For the folks that are illiquid, we've had them out, and those relationships are set in the contract. So those contracts are not renegotiable, and we have no intention of trying to renegotiate those contracts. Those investments were made. They were made in good faith with your legal counsel. The contracts are tight contracts. The fees are what they are. The time frame is what it is. And so we're going to ride those out. You just had a larger share in your portfolio than the investment council did.
I think I only have one other question. I was I asked this question a couple months ago, and I was pointed to Nebraska Revised Statute 79966-1B, and hopefully I'm pointing to the right place, where it...
I don't think I have a tattoo of that.
No, but this is one of the major ones, so you'll probably understand when I give a little more context in that.
Okay.
And that's a requirement that within 30 years, the plan be funded at 100%. I may be citing it wrong. I think I'm citing it accurately, though. Is that your understanding that there's, and if so, is that 30 years from the enactment of the statute in January of 2017? Because my ultimate question is that pretty standard from your experience, that because a pension that's funded at 85-90% is generally considered to be very healthy, and when our school district is being required to make contributions that will bring its pension up to 100%, that's obviously more difficult than 95%. So that's, can you speak to me a little bit? I'm having a hard time understanding that.
And I don't mean to be cute about this, but one of the fun things of being me is that I just run the money. And questions like that, I get to defer to the administrators of the plan. And, Madam Chair, I'm just being straight with you.
No, that's fair.
If that's all right.
I think Mrs. Gotti wanted to.
So actually, there's a footnote in the OPS audit, and I actually spoke to our auditor shortly before the meeting, and so he can talk to you about closed and open 30-year periods and state statute on that, but there is a footnote in the audit report that spells all that out.
What I do know from my service, Board Member Perlman, from my service on the Emperor's Board, is that when you look at comparative data, and you all can find this as well, the Nebraska plans are very well funded compared to their peers.
Thanks a lot.
Madam Chairman, I came hands-free, but I brought a little thing in case I got too nervous to remember everything I wanted to say.
No problem. Mr. Scanlon?
I appreciate everything. I'm just very happy that, or I should say, I feel very much more comfortable with the investment piece being in the state's hands. I've been an outspoken critic of OSERS for a while, and I guess I'm glad to see that we're starting a better, more funded path towards ensuring that we can get folks the pensions that they signed up for, as you'd mentioned. A couple of questions I just had. For what, for your organization, what is your yearly budget?
For us, you know, this is tough when you're the boss and you don't know that part. It's, for the agency, $2.5–3 million.
$2.5–3 million, and you
That's
do,
salaries, and the rent, and keeping
Okay.
the lights on.
And-
Bulk of it's salaries, legal.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
The
how many-
manager fees are apart from, of course, you understand that.
That's separate.
Mhm,
Okay,
that's right.
And you said our manager fees are roughly now 5%.
Yes, your share of our costs,
Mm-hmm.
think of it as a family, because you're part of it now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's as if we just had a baby, and it's you. We brought your assets in, you're sharing some of it, you have to bunk with some of the, we're going to let you use the TV room with the rest of the family, but you still have your own bedroom where those other assets are. So we charge you a pro rata share of the cost of the house. That or an apartment, maybe that's better. We're all in a big apartment. You pay, your share of the garbage bill and that. The manager fees were different, where I talk about the efficiency of the external managers. That 33 basis points on average represents tens of millions of dollars of manager fee. Our share as the agency is 1 basis point of those 33. Yours was, OSERS was 66 basis points, in part because you have higher share of alternatives, which is they cost more. They cost 200 basis points, some of these private equity investments, and that's the way it is. So that's what I was referring to, the 66. And now they were 66, and now they're down to 55. So they're coming down as you transition to our less expensive, more passive portfolio.
Well, and I appreciate that, because I've still been struggling to figure out why we spend $1.5 million a year for our OSERS Board of Trustees budget. That's just, I can't get wrapped around on, why do we spend so much money? And, I mean, you run the state's pension fund, and you're barely $1 million over our budget, and you manage a much higher dollar amount. So
Yeah.
I guess that's helpful. What is currently the state's unfunded portion of their pension? NPERS, yes.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't know that.
Is it
I'd
as
get
low
it
as
wrong.
60% or 58%?
Well, the pension itself is, what, 80–90% funded? Right.
Okay, and OSERS, for the record, is 59% funded?
I thought maybe
It's-
65, I'm not sure.
It's 59 on a market basis, and we don't have the actuarial yet,
I
because
see.
that's been moved to a January 1 date.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess I appreciate you bringing up the, when the market has a lull, not to sell. Did the state sell when the Great Recession happened?
No.
And did OSERS?
I wasn't here then.
Okay, good answer. They did. So I guess
You have to stay, we're invested there. We have no idle cash. We're invested every day, all day.
Okay.
We only raise cash when we need to send some to you, just as we raise cash to fund the state's plan. The DB plan is like your plan, where there isn't enough coming in to cover the payments, so we need to raise investment income to supplement. It's about $3 or $4 million a month. The state is I don't know, 15, 16 million that we have to raise from the portfolio to fund, to fund the states. Of course, theirs is, $10 billion, but yeah. And then the state and county, that's for the defined benefit. The state and county plans are self-funded. They're much smaller, but we stay invested at all times, so we have no uninvested cash.
Would you please send to Matt Ray the investing backgrounds of the board members? So we can just, feel a little bit more comfortable of
You
who's
bet.
doing the investments and everything? Love that.
I'll clarify their role and ours, if that's okay.
Okay.
The investment council, the 5 voting fiduciaries, the 8-member board, but the 5 voting members, they set the investment policy, and embedded in the policy is the approved asset allocation. They hire the investment consultant, which is a third-party consultant. Their name is Aon Hewitt, based in Chicago, one of the largest in the world. And they hire and fire the managers. So we, as the staff, do all the rest. I'm, again, the head of the agency, but we develop the recommendations, partner with our investment consultant to bring those recommendations as to asset allocation, the pie wedges we were talking about, and the people, because the pie wedge comes first, right? What kind of pie, how big are the slices, and then we go find the managers to implement. So structure first, then the managers, and then we take those, both the structure is approved by the council, and then the manager hire and fires are done by the council based on recommendations from the staff.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to send them.
And I'm glad you talked about how much a third of the fund is restricted currently. And I know we had some investments that we lost $25 to $26 million on, some bonds that, were not a good investment. Are there any projected losses based on our restricted investments that you're projecting for? Or should we be able to, as a fund, kind of feel comfortable that we'll get our investment back or make money on those alternative investments?
Here's the truth about alternative investments. And this is the frank truth. None of us knows what the return is going to be for those investments until they roll off the books. And I happen to be very blunt and direct about that when I'm asked that question, because that's the truth. And these are not liquid. You can know every day what you're going to make on a stock investment or a bond investment because you can sell it, and you're going to get what you get, and you can calculate what you made or you lost. But these illiquid investments, you know going in that you've signed a contract that's going to bind you to a partnership that's going to last 10 years, usually with a 1 or 2 year extension, so that's 12 years. And they can invest the first 5 years of that 12-year period, and if they make an investment, some make investments that in themselves take 10 years, you can be looking at investments that are 15 years. And that's on the outside, and when I say this, I take a little heat from folks who say, you're exaggerating, but, with money, you don't want to be disappointed the wrong way with it, right? You want to be surprised the right way with it. And so that's why I'm so clear and firm about the investments. So you can see in the performance reports where we track the total return for traditional investments, stocks and bonds, and the internal rate of return, which is just another calculation of performance for these alternatives. And you can see, and the performance report that we give to OSERS, that you all get, I assume, has 3 components. It has market environment first, so you can place your investment portfolio in the context of what's going on in the world. You'll see the investment performance report, a condensed version for the entire investment council, for the whole 26 billion. So you can see what the council is seeing for reporting, and then you have a third in the document that is specific to OSERS, and that's a shorter document that's maybe runs 30 pages. There's also the Big Kahuna that's 225 pages that OSERS has a tab within, and I'll send one over. I'll get somebody's address so you can at least say you've seen it and you get a sense of what that is. I trot it out to the council. I've just, maybe once a year, just they know and they look at that. A lot of detail in it.
And I think I'm finishing up. How many financial conferences has your board attended in the past year, roughly, throughout the nation?
Of the 8 members, we had 1 member go to 1 conference for 2 days.
Anybody go to Alaska for a conference?
Not in the last 3 years.
Okay, because we've got a lot of frequent flyer miles with our OSERS Board of Trustees that I view as a waste of money, and I'm glad to see that some organization that's outperforming our pension fund is not needing to travel quite so extensively.
I go to a couple of conferences a year. I like to spend my time on the road going to see our managers.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Mr. Perlman?
When the investment council took ownership, I don't know if ownership is the right word, of the OSERS investments, was there any review to see if any of the investments were not in compliance with traditional investing practices or any written policies that this board or OSERS had?
We did not do a compliance review that way, no. I assumed everything was, the contracts were the contracts. They'd been reviewed by legal counsel here. Our concern was to get those contracts assigned. And be clear, there's still contracts with, you're the trustees of the assets. They belong to, what's your real name? Lancaster?
Douglas County.
No, Douglas, got my lips up. Douglas County School District 5 or some. 1, something, yeah, right. I know that. But I call you OSERS. You're part of the family, so I just call you OSERS.
My final question is, the rate of return, 9 and some change percent, does that include the illiquid investments as well?
Yes.
It does, okay. All right, thanks.
Right. Are you interested in the returns of the state compared to OSERS? I mean, I have them. I don't know that that's part of today, but they're in the performance reports. You can read those. And they're different. That's just how it is.
I would suggest that we put the quarterly report on a receipt of reports every quarter so that everyone can see it, because it is a bit of a, your website is good, but I usually want somebody to print it for me, so just getting those things done. So it would be helpful, I think. And then kind of to answer your question, I think, Mr. Perlman, legal counsel reviewed all contracts that OSERS entered into with any fund manager, whether they were alternatives or more traditional. However, OSERS did not have an investment policy on, anything from how much was in one particular fund. They had targets for clearly a policy allocation, but outside of sight of the allocation, there were no policies related to, country, industry, that sort of thing, total with a specific fund manager. So there's far more policies within the Nebraska Investment Council as far as the management of the money than where we were at before. But they were all legally reviewed.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, I want to say thank you for coming tonight and sharing information with us, giving us the update, because as you said, it has been just under a year since the management of those funds shifted over. And to what Mrs. Godding had said, I think we can definitely get copies of those quarterly reports and start attaching them as a receipt or report so that we have that information available to us as well.
And again, those reports, our contact is through the OSER staff and Director Carter, and just so you, we'll be sending stuff through them, and happy to answer any questions. As I tell people, and the superintendent knows, I say this all the time, I eat a sack lunch by myself every day, and I'm be glad to have any kind of company anytime. Certainly phone calls. I've had some phone calls from some of your school district employees after this happened. They numbers in the book, and they found me. They were great. They're interested, and they're good questions. Thanks very much. I don't wear a watch. It feels like I've been here longer than you all planned, but it was a real pleasure. I mean it. I'm going to take my glasses off. You know, there's nothing between us, and I mean that. We're there watching out for you. Happy to answer any questions anytime.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. We will move back up into our action items. And we have J1A, which is our annual audit reports of Omaha Public School District, Educational Service Unit number 19, KIOS FM radio station, and the Omaha School Employees Retirement System.
Here. Oh, did you get it? Okay. Might have to turn that on.
Thank you very much. My name is Darren Ostin. I'm a partner at Syme Johnson, and we did your audits this year. This was our 10th year doing your audits, our first year under our new contract that we did through the RFP process. So I want to thank members of the board for entrusting us in continuing with your audit services. We greatly appreciate that. We are going to go through our audit requirements, and I believe you have a copy of the information, and then the audit reports were also available to you and are contained in the book. I'm not sure if they have electronic copy of the book. Okay, great. So I'm going to start with our deliverables. Our deliverables include the report to the board, which contains our required communications of our audit standards that we're required to communicate to you, and then any internal control related matters that we have. And as we said, the audit reports that we did is the school district audit, ESU 19, KIOS FM radio station, and then we also were engaged by the OSER's Board of Trustees to conduct their audit, and we did present their audit to them at their Board of Trustees meeting on December 6th. So I'm going to start with the required communications in the report to the board, and then we'll go through the audit reports in summary, and then I do have some graphical presentations for you as well that kind of gives a little historical analysis. But I'm going to start with the required communications, and our audits were conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, as well as uniform guidance. Uniform guidance are compliance requirements when you expend more than $750,000 in federal awards. You expend about $81 million in federal awards. Responsibility under professional standards, management's responsible for the financial statements, and I want to talk about the differences between the audited financial statements and the financial statements that Ms. Kanoki presented earlier. Those are on a cash basis, and where you're comparing your budgeted expenditures to your cash basis expenditures. Your audit is in accordance with GAAP, so it's a full accrual. And I'll talk about the differences. There's the government-wide financial statements, which are full accrual, and then the fund financial statements, which are on a modified accrual basis. And so I'll explain some of those differences, but they are quite a bit different from the interim financial statements that you're receiving throughout the year. So as I said, management's responsible for the financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion on those financial statements, and we plan to perform our audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement and are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And our audit report did have, after consideration of the audit adjustments that were proposed, we did have an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements. Some other significant matters, accounting practices. We did implement a new accounting standard during the year. It was required by the GASB, and that is related to tax abatement disclosures. So it didn't affect the amounts in the financial statements, but there is some footnote disclosures related to the tax abatements and the effect that it had on your income tax proceeds related to tax increment financing arrangements that are done through the county governments. And we get those valuations by confirming those amounts with the county governments, both Sarpy and Douglas counties. And then there were no significant or unusual transactions that lack authoritative guidance. And then we do spend time and disclose information about management's judgments and estimates. We disclose the policies and the processes for calculating those estimates, and then we test those processes. And we did feel that after adjustments proposed, that management's estimates were reasonable and consistently stated between years. Audit adjustments, we did have 8 audit adjustments, which included 2 provided by management. Just to kind of give you a comparison, we had 12 audit adjustments last year, so some improvement from that standpoint. The audit adjustments, the impact on the change in net position in the financial statements was about $25 million, and most of that was primarily related to correct some mispostings and the conversion from the cash basis to the accrual basis in that process and correcting some of those entries. And then we did have a couple of past adjustments related to the prior year sick pay accrual, which didn't have any impact on the ending net position, and then the accounts payable cutoff, which was overall immaterial. So those past adjustments we did not reflect in the audited financial statements because they were overall immaterial to the government-wide statements. Other matters, management did not try to influence the audit process. I want to thank Ms. Kanoki and Mr. Kunkel, who's in the back, as well as the numerous members of staff. We are on site for about 3 days in July, and then we are here for about 3 weeks in October, getting through the audit process to get this wrapped up as quickly as possible. And we had a total of 6 people here on and off throughout the 3-week period. So we request a lot of information from a lot of individuals, ask a lot of questions to get to where we need to be. So I do want to thank them for all their efforts in both getting prepared for the audit as well as being available during the audit field work to allow us to complete our work on a timely basis. Certain written communications, we do obtain a management representation letter from management. You could certainly request that from them. And then quality review. Our quality review is also included in there. Every 3 years, we're required to have our processes audited by another outside firm. We actually just went through that process 2 weeks ago and are anticipating to get our report of a pass rating. Again, it'll be another month or so before we get the actual report. Other required communications, so reportable matters in accordance with government auditing standards and uniform guidance. We did not have any reportable matters within that were required to be included in our reports. We did include a couple of internal control related matters in our board report, and that was primarily related to the audit adjustments that we had, the financial reporting process. Due to the timing of an effort to convert from the cash basis to the accrual basis to get the financial statements ready for the audit in a timely basis. It's a significant undertaking. Management can attest to that. You guys are the only district in the state that does present your audit on full accrual basis. The state does allow for cash basis financial statements, which is another basis, other comprehensive basis accounting other than GAAP. But you are the only district in the state that does it on a GAAP basis. Iowa school districts are required to report in accordance with GAAP. Other states, the state of Nebraska, just allows the cash basis of accounting. So you do have a significant process to do that, and we just want to make sure that since we did have some adjustments related to that process, as well as a few entries that were made in that process that were posted in reverse, and we had to correct them. We want to make sure that management is certainly constantly reviewing their control and their process in that financial reporting process to ensure amounts are being reviewed, ensure the amounts in the financial statements are supported, properly supported, and so we want to make sure that that it's being done. So we wanted to include that as a control related matter for them to respond to. And then the capital asset accounting process, and through our audit of that, you have a capital asset module within your accounting software, but there are a number of capital asset transactions that are kept manually or tracked manually. And so sometimes that can be susceptible to error or to omitting things. And so we wanted to make sure that management continues to streamline that capital asset accounting process to make sure that simplifying the process in order to avoid omission or avoid oversight in missing things with that. I know you're going through a accounting update and are incorporating some procedures to try to simplify that process as well. And management's response to both of our findings is included in the report, so you can certainly read those. And then we did include some other new GASB accounting and financial reporting standards that will be affecting you in future years. The most significant one that will probably affect you, won't affect you until 2021, but we wanted to bring it to management's attention now, is the new lease standards, and that all leases are now going to be reflected in the balance sheet as an asset and a liability, as opposed to operating leases just being expensed throughout the year. That could have, and we haven't evaluated that yet, but that could have a significant impact on your financial statements going forward. So we want to make sure management starts to review that process to see what the extent of implementation will be required to comply with that standard. So now we'll move into the audit report. As I said, we did have an unmodified opinion to your financial statements, or a clean opinion. Financial statements were fairly presented in accordance with GAAP after the effect of the audit adjustments that we proposed. We do have reference to other auditors. The foundation is audited by another audit firm, and we do make reference to that in our report. We get some representations from them as part of their audit process, and before we include it in the report, we do make reference to their audit, and that has been historically what we've always done and always been included in your report. We do make reference to some other reporting matters in our audit opinion. Required supplementary information and other supplementary information. That's basically the pension-related schedules required by GASB Statement 68, as well as your budgetary comparison schedules that are included there. Some of that is required supplementary information, and then the Nebraska Department of Education wants you to include every fund budgetary comparison schedule in your financial statements. And then we have the schedule of expenditures of federal awards we make reference to, and government auditing standards. There are separate reports in the back of the audit report that reflect reporting on those. And again, as I said, we had no reportable matters related to those items. The first part of your financial statements is the management discussion and analysis. This is an overview of financial statements. Management can tell their story of what happened in the financial statements. So these are prepared by management, discussion between years, provide comparison. It is required by GASB standards. There are certain criteria that has to be included in there, but it does allow management to explain the financial statements to the readers of the financial statements. So let's move on to the government-wide financial statements. As I said before, the government-wide financial statements are presented on the full accrual basis of accounting. So it does represent a true picture of the financial position and the activities of the district. We'll start with the statement of net position. Total assets and deferred outflows increased by $235 million to just over $1.2 billion. Primary reasons for the increase was you had bond proceeds during the year, so you have some unspent bond proceeds which increase your cash and investments, and then you had an increase of capital assets from the ongoing bond construction projects as well. And related to your bond projects that you have ongoing, you have remaining construction commitments of just just under $78 million as of the balance sheet date. So then we'll get down to net position. Net position is assets plus deferred outflows of resources minus liabilities plus deferred inflows of resources is your net position, or the tangible net worth of the district, essentially, numerically speaking. Your net position is a negative $2.6 million as of at August 31st, 2017. Main reason for that is the net pension liability included in the financial statements of $563 million at August 31, 2017. So just to give you a 3-year comparison, GASB 68 was implemented in 2015. Your net position went from a positive $300 million to a negative $48 million that year just from implementing that. And then in 2016, it went to a positive $3.5 million. And now at 2017, you're at a negative $2.6 million. So as you can see, that you did issue the new bonds, so you got some additional liabilities in the financial statements. Your net pension liability did increase $80.6 million to $563.8 million as of the measurement date. I've got another slide where we'll talk about the net pension liability. Your unrestricted net position is a deficit of $364 million. So you have total net position of $2.6 million. Of that, $166 million is capital less debt. So that's a separate classification of net assets. It's your net investment in capital assets. And then you also have a restricted net position of $184 million, and that's amounts the unspent bond proceeds restricted for capital purposes, as well as you have some money in your debt service funds that is restricted for debt service. So that those net together and are excluded of the unrestricted amount, and that would be the negative $364 million compared to $333 million last year. When we look at the graphs, you'll see the trend line of that, and it'll explain some of this a little bit clearer for you.
Darren, maybe if you want to look on page 5 of the audit report, all those numbers he just said, you can see them flow through, and that might be a little bit easier, but keep going. But I just thought if they wanted to look while you were talking.
Okay, yeah, that's in the MD&A. Overall, in your financial statements, so just if you're going to refer to a page in there, your net position is outlined on page 13, your statement of net position. You're going to make me flip through pages.
Keep
No,
going,
that's all right.
sorry.
That's totally fine. That's why I bring the book along, so we can go through it. So then you have the government-wide statement of activities. So what happened during the year to get to that net position amount and to the statement of net position. So you had total general revenues of $656 million, primarily taxes and receipts from state and federal government for grants and state aid, et cetera, et cetera. Your tax revenue increased $7 million to $318 million, and your state funding increased $28 million to $272 million overall. So that's this taxes and state funding is $590 million of the $656 million total general revenues. You also had program revenues, program-specific revenues of grants of $128 million, and then other charges for services of about $14 million. Total district expenses increased $52 million to $804 million total. Of that, basic instruction increased $25.6 million to about $311 million. That's approximately 41% of your total governmental expenses. That's primarily where most of your teacher salaries, et cetera, are at. Special education services increased $9.6 million to approximately $75 million. And then your debt service interest increased $2.6 million to $15.7 million, and that's because you had interest payments on the new bond issue that took place during the year. So now we're going to move on to the fund financial statements, and I'm going to talk, these are a little different than the government-wide financial statements. So as I said, the government-wide financial statements are full accrual. The fund financial statements are on a modified accrual basis. So they are on the current financial resources method. So your capital assets and your long-term liabilities, or the changes in your long-term liabilities, are reported as revenues and expenditures during the year. So what you expend on capital during the year shows up as an expense or expenditure in the fund financial statements, and that's converted to an asset in the government-wide financial statements, and there is a reconciliation between the fund financial statements and the government-wide financial statements at the bottom of the governmental fund financial statements. So there are three types of fund financial statements. I'll just touch on those real quickly, and then I'm going to highlight some of the items in the fund financial statements. The governmental fund financial statements, as I said, are on the modified accrual basis. And that's where primarily most of your governmental services are at. Your proprietary fund financial statements are on the full accrual basis. That's where the foundation financial statements are included, as well as the co-op fund. And then the fiduciary fund, which is where you're acting a trustee or an agency capacity, that's where OSERS is included in your financial statements. But the fiduciary fund financial statements do not roll up into the government-wide financial statements. They are just held assets and liabilities. The activities in the fiduciary fund, since it's on a trustee or agency basis, are not included in the district's financial position. So I want to touch on some of the fund financial statements. Your governmental funds, the general fund balance increased $23 million to $117 million total. So you have $117 million in your general fund balance. You have a policy to maintain between 10 and 20% of the prior year expenditures in your general fund, and you were at 18.47% as of the audit date. Your total revenue increased $15.4 million to $581 million. State funding was the primary reason for that increase. It increased $11.1 million to about $286 million. Your total expenditures increased $24.1 million to $558 million in the general fund, and that was primarily related to basic instruction expenses increasing 11.7 million to $267 million. Now, part of that increase in the general fund is where your additional actuary required contribution hit. That was a $12 million expenditure during the current year, and a significant portion of that fund is in the general fund. And so that helped attribute to that increase in that fund, in those expenses. Special building fund is primarily where the construction of the bond improvement projects are. You see at $153 million, offset by bond proceeds of $155 million to fund those projects. And then debt service fund had debt service payments of $28 million. That's principal and interest payments. The debt service fund only changed by $3.9 million in total, and that's primarily funded with tax proceeds. So then we'll get into some of the notes on the financial statements. I'm just going to highlight the significant ones and some things that were new this year in your financial statements compared to previous years. The first one I touch on all the time is the summary of significant accounting policies, and really the reporting entity and then the financial statement. So this gives you the definitions of the different financial statements, the measurement, focus, and basis of accounting in each one, and the reporting entity includes all the entities of the district that are included in the district's financial statements. Deposits and investments. So we had some revised disclosures for the OSERS investments this year, with the investments being turned over to the Nebraska Investment Council. They have some different risk criteria and risk aversion that they are applying to. So we included their risk assessment policies for investment portfolio in the financial statements. We disclosed the financial statements at fair value, as well as the extent of foreign currency in the investment portfolios. So we had those new investments, and then we also included the impairment in the Atlantic Asset Management Global Yield Opportunity Fund that you had previously mentioned, the $25 million. That was written down in December of 2016. The capital asset activity, I'll just highlight this. You had total capital additions across all funds of $173 million. That's both the governmental activities as well as the proprietary activities. And then the footnote on the long-term debt. You had the new bond issue of $155 million. That was the 2016 general obligation bonds. You had principal payments of $15.4 million retired during the year, And then your bond obligations outstanding is approximately $475 million, of which about $16.5 million of that is due this coming fiscal year as a current obligation. A few other notes in the financial statements: we're required to disclose the deficit unrestricted net position that I touched on earlier. The tax abatement amount was approximately $12 million. So that is included in the disclosure. Again, as I said, we confirmed those values with the different county governments and the county treasurer's offices. And then we had a couple subsequent events in there. You did receive an overpayment from Douglas County for the learning community tax proceeds. I think you are all aware of that, and that's been repaid. And then you authorized the bond issuance for the last piece of your 2014, I believe it was the last piece, was the last piece of the 2014 bonds that were done subsequent to year end. So now we'll get to the net pension liability footnote, and this will probably answer a couple of your questions that you had for the Nebraska Investment Council presenter and talking about that. So there's two different standards related to the disclosing the investment. There's GASB Statement 67, which is the plan side, so that's what's included in OSER's financial statements. And then there's GASB Statement 68, which is the employer side, and that's what's included as the net pension liability in your financial statements. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because the measurement dates are different, and it's confusing, but they're different. So in OSER's planned financial statements, it would be as of August 31, 2017, based on the most recent valuation, which was 1/1 of 17, and then that is update procedures are applied to that by the actuaries to roll that liability forward to August 31, 17. And then at August 31, 17, that liability was, the total net pension liability was $867 million. And I know you talked about what the funded portion of that in OSER's financial statements. It was 58.72 based on market value. The 1/1 valuation had the market liability was $902 million, so it actually went down between the 1/1 valuation and the roll forward to 8/31. Part of that is the additional $12 million that you contributed to help reduce that. The actuarial valuation was $713 million, and about 65% funded. For the district's financial statements, you recognize your share of the liability in your financial statements, and it's based off the measurement date of a year prior. So that took place the initial year we implemented GASB 68. It had to be based, it was the employer share is based on a year in arrears, because that's when the information is readily available to include in there. The GASB standard states that the measurement date should be no earlier than the employer's prior fiscal year, and then it's applied consistently. So once we did it that first year, being a year in arrears, it has to stay that way every year, okay? So this is based off of the August 31, 2016 valuation, where the funded status was 63.68%. So you'll see the footnote disclosures in the district's financial statements are a little different than what was your August or your January 1 measurement date. So that's just why I want to point this out in case there were any questions for you. Total net pension liability is $678 million. The district's proportion of that net pension liability, which is what is included in your financial statements, is $563.8 million. The state is a contributing non-employer. They contribute 2% contributions. You guys contribute 9.8778. So if you take the 9.8778 divided by 11.8778, it's 83%. So you're recognizing 83% of the net pension liability in in the district's financial statements. The state actually recognizes the other 16.84% in their financial statements, because they have a continuing contribution requirement to the plan going forward. So they recognize a portion of that net pension liability. And you see I have the required contribution rate there. Your required contributions were $47.9 million in 2017, which includes that 12.75 or 12,750,000 ARC required for solvency. So your question before about solvency and the 30-year period that you had talked about. So that, the statute requires an actuarially required additional contribution to maintain solvency. That's what the definition is. So you put your normal 9.8778% in, and then you had to, the actuary computed the required contribution based upon the statutory definition of the closed 30-year period. So the closed 30-year period means that period never changes. It stays 30. So it's calculated each year based on what it would take to make that actuarially required contribution based on a 30-year period going forward. So now if that period kept going down because you want to meet it by 30 years, then the number would obviously be bigger. And when it was calculated based on the shorter period, it was like 15 point something million, but you were only required to contribute the 12,750,000 because it's based on that closed 30-year period. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it still doesn't answer the question. Two questions. One, how standard is that around the country? I understand the closed.
Yeah,
So
okay,
I-
okay.
You know, I try to teach myself a little bit about that. I understand that. But 100% seems like an unnecessary goal, considering, I think, the widespread belief that if a pension is funded at 95%, there's nothing to worry about. So, I mean, I could be wrong, but 95% would be a spectacularly funded pension, and so,
So next year, that will be calculated again, and then based on that 30-year period. So if you have good investment performance, et cetera, that number could go down depending on what the valuation of the net pension liability is, which you change some assumptions, the liability goes up. So it's getting bigger. But ultimately, you'll never, like, if you set the 30-year period now and had to fund it based on an open 30-year period where the period would reduce and you'd have to keep putting more in, then you would get to 100%. This way, with that period constantly being 30 years out, it's just calculating it 1 year based on that 30-year period. So then the next year, that 30-year period changes again. See what I'm getting at? Does that make sense? Yeah, that's how the law was written based on LB 477. Is that the right number? 447? 47 or 77? I'd have to look, but that's how that was written to define the solvency, that's what would be needed. And if your actual contributions would ever be that number, then you wouldn't necessarily have to put more in by definition. But does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
I mean, just to a large degree, yes, but would it give the district some relief or if the requirement, even if it's done yearly, were say 98%, 95%?
Oh, sure, it would. Yeah, if you calculated that 30-year period to get to X percent funded, then the definition of solvency would probably change a little bit, yeah.
And is there any,
It would require a change in the law.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But is there any downside to that? I mean, I guess 100% is always better than 95%, but in your professional opinion, is 95%, would that be a very healthy funded pension?
Compared nationwide, yes, and we'll look at the next slide to say that. I mean, do I know what the definition of, obviously 100% is the most healthy you have, but, as you stressed, long term, you're in this for the long term, just to make sure that the plan is solvent, to be able to, I think right now the issue is your contributions going in are somewhat less than some of the benefit payments going out, and if you're not having the investment returns to help support that difference, then your assets are going to continue to shrink, and I think that's why some of that got written into the law, and so that you're trying to just catch up from that point. Now, if that needs to get changed at a point in time because you get to a healthier position, yeah, 100% obviously is very healthy compared to, but you'll see on the next slide when we get into it, some states are in a lot worse shape than you guys are. I know NPERS is in a much healthier position than what you guys are from that standpoint, but yeah, it's very widespread and different throughout the country, and I know they progressively have gotten worse over the years, but. So the last piece on this slide that I want to touch on is the sensitivity analysis that's required to be disclosed. So at August 31, 2016, your actuarial assumptions were based on an 8% discount rate. So you can see if you reduce the discount rate by 1%, it takes that liability from 678 to 900. And then if you would increase the investment earnings, the discount rate, it would take it to, just under 500 million. Now, with your 1-1 valuation, you lowered your rate from 8 to 7.5. So you can see if you take that halfway difference, your liability is going to go up, which is why at your 1-1 valuation, based on market value, we're sitting at 902 million, actually. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
So just trying to condense this into something for my own brain here. So we heard earlier that the rate that we got was over 9% this year.
Yes. So this is the assumed, the expected expected investment earnings. So this is the assumption to calculate your the total pension liability, and then you take the actuarially funded assets is based on the assumptions. You obviously have actual, so it'll be a little bit different from that. So differences between expected and actual earnings are one of the deferred inflows and outflows items that get recognized over a period of time. Then get charged to pension expense over a period of time. That's included in the disclosure as well. I didn't want to get into the details of all that because I could probably sit here all night and try to talk through this, and I know Matt doesn't want me to do that.
But I want to make sure we understand that
Yes,
9%
yes.
is year-to-date calendar year, not fiscal year, and our return on the
So your
fiscal
return,
year was
your return on the
different.
OSER's investments during the fiscal year 9/1 to 8/31, removing the impairment, was a little over 8% for that fiscal period. So it was actually a little bit over the expected return. So, and now, the market's doing well. I think you said you had 9.5 for the was it the 9 months ended September? You were talking 9. I don't know where that number came
right,
from. but-
right. That came off of the Aon report from
So
the
it's-
Nebraska
so you-
Investment Officer.
I just want to make sure that that's
Yeah.
what we're referring to right here, is that
So-
fluctuation and the impact it has on the overall liability.
Right, so our actual return was about a little over 6% for the year because of the impairment.
Right.
And because of our benefit payments being greater than what we're receiving.
So you're,
When
yeah.
you talk about impairment, you talking ARC?
No, I'm
the-
talking
the
about
asset
the
impairment, the
Atlantic Asset
the
Management.
Atlantic impairment. So obviously, that's figured into your investment return during the year. So that does lower the amount of cash that came into the plan through investment earnings, and therefore available to cover the pension liability. And that's really where that's figured in. So now, this year, the investment performance has so far been good, been stronger, and so hopefully if that continues to exceed the expected earnings, that will have a positive impact on your net pension liability. So when I was presenting at the OSER's meeting, Superintendent Evans had asked the question about comparing OSER's performance to CAPER's, and being a Kansas guy, you would ask that question. And so I included this graph. We got this. It was included in an article from Bloomberg. It's the public employee pension funding ratio by state based on 2016 figures. And so you can see it shows Nebraska in here at 88.8. It shows Iowa at 81.6. Kansas is 65.1. The lowest funded plan was New Jersey at 30.9. So there are, like I said, there are several that are the dark red are the states that are in worse shape than others from that standpoint. But I was just going to do this as a comparison. So as we said, the 1/1/17 valuation of OSER's, the actuarial funded computation based on actuarial valuation of assets was 65%. Based on the actual market value of the assets, it was 56%. N per 7/117 valuation, the actuarial was 86.72, so it changed, went down a little bit from what's included in this 2016 figure. And then the IPERS one, just as a comparative, being close, the actuarial funded value was 81.4, so it pretty much stayed about the same compared to the 81.6 that's in there. So I just wanted to provide that for you, informational purposes. The median value overall, the averages, or the median, not the mean, the median is 71%, 71.1. So that's dead smack in the middle out of the states that are included. I think there's about 5 or so states that didn't have any information, but I just wanted to include that for you for informational purposes. So now we'll move on and through the rest of the audited financial statements. The required supplementary information includes the budgetary comparison schedules, as I said. General and special revenue funds are required supplementary information. The other funds are just supplementary information required by NDE. And then you have the pension-related schedules, the changes in the net pension liability, and the employer contributions during the year. Audit in accordance with uniform guidance. So we have the schedule of expenditures of federal awards that we audit. The major programs, we have to select a sample of major programs. We have to make sure that we cover at least 20% of your federal awards in the major programs that we determine based on done on a risk assessment basis. And the 2 programs that we did this year were the Child Nutrition Cluster and then the Medicaid MAPS program. And we didn't have any findings reported. And as you can see, we covered 34.8% of that. So now I've got a few graphs for you, just historical analysis, informational purposes. Your average daily membership, comes from your annual financial report that's submitted to NDE on November 1st of each year. We are required, in accordance with Rule 1, to do some tests of compliance with the calculation of this. Your average daily membership included in the AFR, since it affects the state aid formula. So we did do some tests on that. We didn't have any findings that were material to the calculation. Your average daily membership did go up 1.3% from 2016 to 2017. So we submit a separate letter to the state that they require all the auditors of the school districts to do. Your per pupil cost based on the average daily membership for 2017 was $11,582 based on your AFR. That's a 3.3% increase from 2016. And then I have statewide average and the learning community averages included in there as well for 2016. The 2017 information is not readily available. The learning community, the high is 13,480 and the low is 9,220. And again, this is based on your AFR. And this is on, the AFR is done on a cash basis, not based on the accrual basis amounts. And here's the graph of your total net position. So as you can see, the big change took place in 2015 when GASB 68 was implemented. For 2017, if you take out the effect of GASB 68, the net pension liability as well as the deferred inflows and outflows of resources related to pension, your net position would be just over $400 million. It'd be $400,403,000. So you can see the impact that has on what your financial position looks like on paper. And again, that's a long-term liability. Doesn't have to be paid back right away, but it does indeed affect the look of your financial statements for sure. Governmental fund revenues. So this is all governmental funds. $720 million. It's about a 3.9% increase from last year. Your taxes were up about $7 million, and state funding was up about $12 million overall. This does not include bond proceeds. The bond proceeds are disclosed not in with revenue. They're considered another financing source. That was another $155 million during the year. The governmental fund expenditures, $842 million compared to $735 million last year. So the 2 increases in 16 and 17 are primarily related to capital and the bond issuances and the expenditures on capital improvements. You had $153 million this year. You had $74 million last year. So that's why those are ticking up. And then your bond obligations, as I said before, you have $475,306,000 in bond obligations. Of that, your debt service requirement over the next 5 years is approximately $35 million. Now that'll change with the new issuance that went out after fiscal year end, but in the financial statement, you'll see your principal and interest requirements. Each of the next 5 years is about $35 million. And you made payments of about $16 million during the year on your bond obligations. General fund revenue, so the primary fund of the district, $580 million compared to $565 million last year, a 2.7% increase, primarily related to state funding increase of about $11 million and taxes of about $4 million. And then that's offset by the expenses of $558 million. That's about a 4.5% increase, but you were under your budget by about $26 million. Based on cash basis. This is not based on cash basis. This is on the modified accrual, but you were under budget on the cash basis. And the main change here was the basic instruction costs of about $12 million. And a lot of that was the ARC payment that was included in there as part of that increase. General fund balance. So as I said before, you have $117 million. You're required to maintain between 10 and 20%. It was 18.47% of your general fund expenditures. Your general fund balance was up 18% during the year. And then I just included a graph of your schedule of expenditures of federal award. You can see you ranged from about 80 to 83 million over the 5-year period. The schedule of expenditure of federal awards is presented on a cash basis in your financial statements. And of your federal awards you received, of that 81 million, 43 million comes from Nebraska Department of Education, and then another 29 million of that is the food program. Those are the two biggest federal awards in that. And then I will open it up for any more questions.
Mrs. Gadding.
Well, I know I've made this comment before, and so I just want to make it again since we have quite a few new board members that maybe haven't been here before. First of all, thank you very much for all the work that you do to get all this pulled together for us.
Thank you.
Why I didn't do fund accounting when I was an auditor. But our district is the only accrual basis, as you mentioned, in the state.
In the state, yes.
And we also have one other thing that makes us different in the state, that is we have our own pension system.
Correct.
And so what happens on all of the other financial statements across the state is they get a footnote that says, here's what your pension liability is. And it doesn't show up in their actual financial statements, and they're not talking about it related to net position in the same way
Right.
we are.
Right.
And so it does make it more challenging for us, but I would still say that the accrual basis makes it far more accurate to reflect revenue and expenditures, and because we're so large, we also are tracking capital expenditures,
Yes.
where districts that don't have the accrual basis are not tracked, those are expensed.
Right. Their capital expenditures are not in their balance sheet, and
Right.
their bond obligations are not in their financial statements. They are disclosed. They do
Right.
not disclose capital, but they do usually disclose their obligations because they are commitments for future payments.
But at the same time, they're not tracking any of that, any of those capital items, and so that
Correct.
does end up, talking to other finance people across the state, it can be a little bit challenging. So I
Yes,
just want to point out
yes.
to the Board of Education, while it makes it more challenging for our financial statements, it's a very accurate reflection of what we have and when the revenues and when the expenditures come in versus tucking them into a drawer until after September 1st. So I think that that's a really positive, and that our taxpayers should feel very good about the transparency of that. GASB 77 TIF is frequently a question that comes up. Is that footnote number 12 on page 53? I just want to make sure that the board member, because it seems like we have that conversation every once in a while.
That is correct. So, and yes, and how, as I said before, it was 12 million. So we included in the table the amounts that were applicable to the amounts levied through the district. The others, which is only a little over 4 million, The other 7.5 million came through basically the valuation that runs through the learning community, and that's your share of it. That's what that represents.
Okay.
And those, again, we confirmed those amounts with the counties to make sure that we had the right amount. Because obviously that information is not available to you guys. We have to get that from the county and the various taxing authorities to get that. So we did send confirmation letters to them for them to provide us the information to include that in here. Now, that will look different in this year's financial statements because the learning community levy, the general levy obviously went away.
Right.
So that'll be reflected a little differently next year.
So really, comparable to what happens when the learning community goes away, it really looks like 12 million instead of 4, is what you're saying?
Well, the table will reflect
It'll
all of
reflect
it
all of
because
it.
you're collecting based on your levy and your valuation now, as opposed to, the first 95 cents going through the learning community.
Right,
So-
okay. It seems like that comes up in our conversations on TIF, so I think,
Yeah,
I like it as a footnote.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we understood where that difference between 12 million and 4 million is.
Right.
And
So you
I understood
ultimately
too.
could have collected that much more money if the valuations
Right.
had not been reduced for the TIF piece, which then, whether you change your levy amounts, that sort of thing, you'd all reflect that part of it, but
Right.
yes.
And you guys don't do the audit for the foundation. Would it be possible to get a copy of that audit attached to our
Yeah, they
agenda?
provide it to us. I mean, we have a
So
copy
if we
of
could
it,
just
so-
get a copy of the foundation audit as a receipt or report, I think that would be good. I want to thank Connie for working obviously closely with you guys to get everything done, but for also working diligently just to get our fund balance up to the close to 18 million. That has a significant impact on our bond rating. And so as we allow that, when it deteriorates, and we had that happen one year, that has a negative impact. So I really want to compliment the district on getting that up, because I think that's a real positive. When you did the calculation for the state and district split of the pension liability,
Yep.
does the ARC payment go into that calculation or not?
It will next year. So
Okay.
the split of the proportionate share of your percentage of the net pension liability is based on the contributions in that period. So next year, your measurement date will be August 31, 17, for the employer's liability, August 31, 18. So you'll take your contributions for 17, which you still did the 9.8778, the state still did 2, but then you added 12,750,000 to that. So your percentage will actually go up. You will reflect a higher percentage of the liability in your financial statements. And I wrote that down, what that change was. Let me get to that slide quick. So right now you're at 83.16. It goes up to about 87.4 base, and I did that based off of the pension liability recorded in the OSER's 8/31/17 financial statements, because I assume that will be the valuation at the measurement date next year. Or
Okay.
it'll be really close to that, so.
Okay, no, that
So
helps.
so yeah,
thank
your
you for
percentage will
clarifying.
go up about 4%. You'll reflect a higher percentage of that,
So a higher percentage of the liability will
Of the
flow
total pension
into our
yes,
financial
correct,
statements than what has
correct.
been flowing
Next
in.
year, yeah.
Okay. And then I just want to reflect on the OSER's financials on page 7. The net increase in net position, which is roughly 45 million, is approximately a 3.8% increase in the previous year's ending balance. So I just said 6%. 6% was
Investments.
all the investment activity less expenses. We heard tonight that we'll reduce expenses as we move forward, but we're still committed on that, on those alternatives and some of those other ones.
You'll reduce expenses, plus you have well, I guess this does have the additional contributions in there as well. so.
Right. But then the difference really happens, the reason that 6% comes down to 3.8% is that we're about 27 million more in payments out than what we are in receipts in. And so So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that statement. The other thing that goes back to what Mr. Michael Walden Newman said when he was here talking about the investments, there's a footnote on page 14 of the OSERS portion. It's footnote E, or item E under footnote 3, I think, where it shows the limited partnerships. So that's the items he's talking about, that 405 or 406 million
Yep.
that is still out there that
Yeah.
they've got invested. We have yet to commit we've got another 122 million committed to that. So we'll be putting in 122 million in addition to
What's
the
already-
405 that's there over the course of the next 5 to 10 years
Yeah.
into those
And
investments.
I'm
So I
not,
just-
and I'm not
for
sure if
transparency.
any of those drop off before the 5 years, because there's a number of investments there. I'm not sure if any of them drop off before the 5, but without looking
I
at
think-
it, I'd have to.
Yeah, I've kind of looked back. I don't think
Right.
I don't
I'm
think
not
we lose
sure,
a whole lot. I know Mr. Evans and
But
I
yes,
talked
you do
about
have,
that.
you do have some additional.
But, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure from a transparency piece, yes, we have that 405 million, which is about a third of the portfolio, but we'll be adding to that until we can get out of those investments. So I think it's important for
Ms.
us to
Scott?
understand that.
Does that number increase each year for
No,
the
this
district's
is the
payment
total,
into?
the total left in commitments that we had
Previously
previously
contracted
committed to, so-
you don't have to put it in all at once, you put it in over a period of time, but you have,
Right.
you have unfunded commitments to make of 120.
I'm talking about our
Yeah.
ARC payment. Does that increase each year?
Oh,
then?
the ARC
the ARC
payment.
payment? Oh, yeah.
Well, it's recalculated every year, yes.
Right,
So-
based on
But,
So it
what
could,
we have today.
if some stuff that's rolling off, it could possibly, no?
No.
potentially, yes, but, so,
no.
no, the biggest thing that will affect you when they do that this year and recalculate that on the 1/1/18, and I guess it was last year too, they changed some of the assumptions. And so, yeah, the ARC payment's still gonna be there, this year, because your liability went up quite a bit.
Right, and when you're saying roll off, when they do roll off, that money can be reinvested.
Reinvested in something
in
else.
something that might not be quite as risky and have that more stable versus the roller coaster type return. But as Mr. Michael Walden Newman said, nobody knows until the last day whether that is what's rolling off. We don't know what that amount will be. So I think that was a nice way to put that.
And some of those investments did have positive return on investments, so some of them did. So obviously, you had the one that was very negative, yeah.
Right.
No Bitcoin. Just kidding. No Bitcoin.
I'm not going to touch that. Item, yeah.
Any other board member questions or comments? Mr. Evans?
Just, thank you, Madam President. Just a point of reference, I don't want the staff at home, as we're having the conversation, believing that we can't, one, make the ARC payment. I mean, that's why we're forming this committee. We're going to make that ARC payment, and we want all of our employees to feel confident that those checks are still going to be mailed out. It's just, it's a challenge for us to make up for all the low investment returns and some of the other things, but I don't want them to hear the conversation, say, my goodness, NPERS is funded 20% more than we are, which is what Mr. Scanlon pointed out earlier, and that's true. They are. Their investment returns have been better than ours, and they're doing a lot better than we are. But we're going to make sure it's solvent. I don't want our employees to call my office or Mr. Ray's office tomorrow morning, because I want them to know they're just fine. We'll figure it out, and we'll work it through, and that's why we're doing a budget committee, and we've got statutory responsibility. Absolutely, we have statutory responsibility, and that's one of the reasons why I asked Darren to put the chart up. We're not the only pension fund with a 64% funded ratio. Across the nation, actually, it was pretty close to average. NPERS happens to be one of the best in the nation, which is also very evident when you look at that graph, too. So they're in a great spot, and we're kind of in a spot that a lot of pension funds are in, and they're trying to figure out how to dig their way out of it. They made some bad investment decisions that didn't work out well. but now it's going the right direction. We heard 9.5% this last year, so there are some good news pieces on the horizon, but it'll be a while. It's quite a bit of digging. Thanks.
All right. I wanted to say thank you, Darren and Connie and your team for, there is a lot of work and going over financial statements and putting together this audit every year. And it is a lot of information for us to digest. So as you look through it, if you do come up with questions, feel free to reach out to anyone to get those answered. This is something that we do have to have a motion to accept the audit. So if anyone would like to make that motion.
I make a motion that we accept, is it all audits or?
The 2016-17 annual audits
Audit.
of Omaha Public School District, ESU 19.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Godding and a second by Mr. Snow to accept the 2016-2017 annual audits of the Omaha Public School District, ESU number 19, KIOS FM radio station, and the Omaha Schools Employees Retirement System. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Gadding.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Pearlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I probably went through that in a little more detail than I have in the past, but I know a lot of you were new, so I wanted to make sure I tried to explain the differences in some of the fund financial statements. We are working for you, the board, so if you have any questions, feel free to call us anytime throughout the year. I have conversations with Ms. Godding periodically throughout the year. She'll ask me questions. That's what we're here for. We don't want to just come and do the audit. We want to be there for you if you do have questions. Connie has my contact information, so please feel free to reach out anytime, or if you want to run it through Ms. Godding, you can certainly do that, or Connie, and we'll get you answers to any questions you have. So I just want to make sure you guys were aware of that, so you have that. We want to be there for you to answer any questions that you have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we will move on to item J1B, which is the first reading of policy updates, which were presented as information items at our last meeting. Do you have any changes or updates, Mr. Ray?
No changes since provided on the 4th of December.
I would like to make a motion to approve the recommended policy changes that are before the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Snow and a second by Ms. Ryan to approve the first reading of the policy updates before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Holman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Pearlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Gadding.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Just for the record, we do have the option to waive second reading, or if no one makes that motion, these policies will come back for second reading at our first meeting in January. Okay, seeing no motion, they will come back for second reading at our meeting on January 8th. And then we do have agenda item J1C, which is the 2017-2018 compensation schedules for employee categories not under negotiated contracts. Okay. Is there any discussion? If none, I would entertain a motion on this item.
So move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Snow and a second by Ms. Godding to approve the 2017-2018 compensation schedules for employee categories not under negotiated contracts. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
America.
Aye.
Pearlman.
No.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Gadding.
Aye.
Hallman.
Aye.
7 aye, 1 no.
Motion carries. We will move on to our other information item. And first up is J2B CBOC Phase 1 2014 Bond Program Update. And we have Mark Summer, and thank you both for being patient this evening and sticking this out.
Sure, we're going to partner up a little bit on this, I think, on this item, but we do have our CVOC representative here, and he's going to share a few words first, and then I'm going to go through about 400 pages of text and numbers, so hopefully everyone's ready for that.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brett Vosick, and I'm a member of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. We've been meeting for the last 3 years, and the meetings always go very smoothly. I just wanted to share some brief highlights from our most recent meeting last Wednesday, December 13th. So just real quick, Jacobs reviewed the detailed status reports of all the projects that are out there currently underway, and let us know exactly what's going on with those. They also shared updated statistics regarding the Economic Inclusion Program. They provided an overview of the new Tableau web interface, or the web dashboard, which provides information about the status of the bond program. That looks really neat. They also shared information regarding the third bond sales tranche, and also covered an overview of the Phase 2 bond issue. So that was great information for the CBOC meeting. We hadn't covered a lot of that yet, so that was good to share. So just overall, Jacobs has been great to work with throughout this whole CBOC process of the last 3 years, and I can't imagine how this would go without them. Just a word for them. And if you guys have any questions for me, you can ask me now, or I'll just be over here if you want to ask anything. So otherwise, I'll turn it over to Mark.
I think, do you have a question, Mr. Snow?
Yes, Mark?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Well, I just, excuse me, just had like one question. The question is, what was your overall experience being on the CBOC committee? And the second part of that question, what would you recommend to the board as we move down the road on potentially another bond to kind of help CBOC?
An overview of my experience. It's been a very positive one. I guess I've never been a part of a project this big. You're talking $420 million and several hundred construction projects. So the scope is enormous, and so how do you? I don't know how we would have managed that. So that part of watching someone else and the detail they're able to provide, it's been a very positive one. So they made it very easy on Jacobs made it very easy for us. So I've had a very positive experience being on it. Just learning how the whole process works has been very good. And the second part of your question was what recommendations I might have?
Recommendations or feedback you would like to give moving forward with CBOC?
I think the structure's sound, how the committee's designed, or the makeup of it, community members, they do their best to get there. Attendance sometimes is lacking, but that's probably that way for all kinds of citizens committees. So I don't know how you drive attendance up, but that would probably be the one thing that would be good. So I don't know. Otherwise, it's been overall very positive. So I don't really have a overarching recommendation on how to change things moving forward. It's been good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Mrs. Gadding.
I just want to thank you for serving on the committee and showing up and being faithful to the process, because that really gives us a level of confidence when we know community members are out there attending and asking questions and being a part of the process. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anything else?
Okay, thank you. I think you are free for now. But
Okay, all right.
Okay, I will try to move fairly quickly through the information this evening. It's been a few months since we've been here. Of course, a lot of things. Again, appreciate all the approvals that the board has provided to keep the program as a whole moving forward. Not going to spend a lot of time on the agenda, but just overall, continue to run the program on time and on budget. No staff or student kind of safety incidences. There's been 2 contractor safety incidences. All folks have returned back to work, so from a severity perspective, fairly minor in the scheme. Just a reminder, there's 83 total projects, and all the projects are either active in the design process, in the construction process, or they've been completed. So another significant milestone is getting the last one into the design process, which we've accomplished. Total contract amounts, again, this value here reflects all the contracts and purchase orders that this board has approved. We've passed the 75% mark again, another pretty significant milestone. Expenditures nearing the $260 million value at $259 million. We added some additional information, and part of the additional information on this slide as it relates to this forecasting is we are getting closer to the end. And so I know in many of the small group meetings that we've had related to Phase 2 and just how was Phase 1 going, where are we going to be, we wanted to, this last month I really worked with my team. We talked a lot about this in CBOC and really tried to forecast out all of the potential expenditures related to this referendum that's currently ongoing. And I will say it's a fairly conservative approach. Many of the projects that we're projecting are still in design. So again, historically, as the projects move closer or after their bid, we update the forecast and then we can reflect that accordingly. So, but ultimately what this is saying is it's forecasting to spend the entire referendum. Again, there is projects going out for bid on a fairly regular basis over the next couple of months, so we'll continue to update this forecast. We feel like late spring or early summer will be a time where we could really offer a value that would be tangible to the staff or to the board to potentially look at from a savings perspective. To do that prior to would not be responsible for our services. Of course, there can be, everyone can draw their own conclusions, but I just want to make sure. You heard a lot about the roller coaster tonight. We want the bond program to be that smooth ride. We want to make sure that everything in Phase 1 can be completed to its fullest, just to make sure that the community sees the total value. So from here on out, as we provide presentations and information, we'll continue to focus in on that forecasted value. Of course, the contract amount will continue to climb and that forecasted amount will go down as those turn into actual contracts, and then any savings, we'll identify a program savings, kind of a placeholder for that, and start populating value in that. A program contingency, again, based on the forecast, you can see projecting utilizing the majority of that with just about 0.32% remaining at the end of the program. Again, this is a year and a half, almost just shortly under 2 years away. A lot of projects in design and construction, kind of a conservative forecast looking forward. Just a refresher on the bond sales. I thought this was great information. Tranche 1, 2, and 3. Almost $154 million in the first tranche, 3.4% interest rate. $155 million in the second tranche at a 3.51% interest rate, and the third tranche that recently closed about a month ago, if I understand it correctly, $113.7 million, and that was close to a 3% interest rate. So, of course, the timing of the bond sales from an interest rate perspective and a market response has been very, very good. Next item here, just on economic inclusion, just going to kind of take you down to the two points at the bottom. $36.9 million is the current commitment value. I think initially when we set out, I don't think we thought $40 million was an opportunity, but it is currently. There's still some significant projects to be bid, and we think we can get $40 million in SEB contract commitments, which would be significant for the overall program. Of course, you can see payments of $27.4 million for the small businesses as well. Now I'm going to move into a couple of slides here. This here is Bell Ryan. It's a 600-student school. On the right-hand side is just a time-lapse video of the actual project. demolishing of the old building, construction of the new. 600-student building. It's built quite a bit back off of where it previously was constructed. You'll see there's a new front parking lot. We've been working with the district over the last several months to plan its move. The move's actually kind of ongoing now, and it'll be finalized over winter break, and then students will be back to their new site come January 9th, I believe, 9th or 10th. The Monday they have off. Tuesday is going to be a non-student day for staff to get familiar with the facility, and then Wednesday will be that first student day after break. So if you haven't had a chance to drive by the facilities, at least from an exterior, it's just completely different. It will be a real exciting time for the kiddos and the communities. Next project I have on here is the Boyd Elementary, pardon me, can you get to some of my notes? Boyd Elementary, it's in schematic design. It's going to have a new front entry kind of in the lower left-hand side. I'm looking at the plan on the right in the orange area, so there'll be a new secure entry. In total, there's about a 12 classroom addition that occurs here at this campus. A new media center will get constructed, and as part of those new classrooms that are built, it'll also have a new safe area. Continuing to work through the projects, Columbian, if you've driven by that site, some of the earthwork is kind of started. One of the unique aspects of this project is the new facility will be built while the existing facility is fully operational. So we've worked a lot on the site phasing, of course, with the campus and with the design team. So the new facility will be constructed, it'll be fully operational and utilized, and then the existing one will be demolished. So that was similar to Mount View. For those that may have been remembered, the new campus was built kind of in the background, and then the old building was demolished after the kiddos moved over. So that will happen. That's about a 450 student school is what that is projected for. Florence Elementary, of course, the kiddos that are in Florence, at the Florence School are currently at the Mills facility. It's an empty campus, allows for the new construction of the Boys and Girls Club. You can see where the new front entry is going to be with that raised element, kind of the green band. That's just an exterior hardy board that's put up for new construction. But they'll kind of have a single entry point and then be able to break off to the left to go to the new Boys and Girls Club facility, or right into kind of the secure entry to the school. The admin in this location also gets moved around, again, to provide a more secure entry. And then there's a large bus drop-off that also gets constructed on that site. In addition to the building work that Boys and Girls Club is partnering with the district on, you folks have also approved an amendment to their agreement, I believe, for them to provide some additional funding to modernize the play field that is on the west side of the school building there. So we're going to update that into a soccer field, some retaining walls, and some fencing and stuff. But they wanted to make sure that that was an opportunity for the kiddos at the school and the kiddos that utilize the club. So another great example of the partnerships the district has. Gilder Elementary, a similar theme, new front entry in the center picture with the lift on the upper side. This is coupled with a new front drop-off for those of you that have are familiar with the campus. And on the back side of the school, there's a large addition that's been constructed. It's about 6 classrooms, some kindergarten spaces, some early childhood spaces as well, a new media center, and then, of course, that new construction coupled with the safe area configuration as well. Oak Valley Elementary School, a school that we're planning some significant moves over the winter break. It's a phased project, but it also will receive elements of the new entry you can see in the upper right-hand photo there. It'll have all new windows throughout the facility. The existing gym windows have been abated and infilled with the plywood for right now. In addition, there's a 3 classroom addition that is in the, it would be the, northeast kind of area of the facility. Some of the kiddos, that they have a little larger ACP population at this site, so there's kind of a health suite that's been constructed in the addition, and it's also part of their safe area as well. Continuing to move through, Western Hills is on the same timeline as Bell Ryan. It will be turned over fully. It's in the process of winter break. Kiddos, again, will start here after a break in their new facility. They'll move back from the 60th and L Street site. 600-student school, a brand new facility. Again, if you've had a chance to drive by, if you haven't, and pretty phenomenal work that's been going on. A lot of excitement around getting here over break. And initially, there were some discussions of would it be easier to move in the summer, which historically the district has done. So, but the operations group has really kind of stepped up to the challenge of it's best for the kiddos to get to this new facility as soon as possible. It's ready, so the contractors, everyone really buckled down, got the things done that they needed to, and so far the planning and execution of the move has gone very, very well. Beverage, another significant project that's coming to an end. They finished the last phase of construction, which is the far south end of the second floor, which is all the academic classrooms. What you see here in the photos on the left-hand side is really the new front entryway. And at this campus, the main entry isn't right there on the face. You actually walk underneath the Media Center addition and into a courtyard area where the primary doors are. Upper right-hand photo is a Media Center that was part of this new addition. New auditorium seating, and in the far lower right-hand side is the black box that's now on the campus. Bryan Middle School, this is actually a project that just we received bids on a couple days ago, and the contractor's putting together their GMP. But Bryan Middle School is partnering up with, or the district's partnering up with, Boys and Girls Club at this site as well. This is a little bit different than the Florence site. The Florence site, of course, is elementary, so the club is a little bit more geared towards that. This is more of a teen center, if you will. It's coupled with the middle school, of course, with the high school just down the road. So in the lower, on the right-hand side, with the pink and blue diagram in the far bottom right, you can see there's kind of an addition with a gymnasium in it. That gymnasium actually is going to be built for the safe area for the entire school. So that's going to be one of the benefits, of course, of the Boys and Girls Club, along with all the other partnering they can do. Similar concept where you'll be able to enter in a single point, though, and then move to your left-hand side to enter Boys and Girls Club, or right-hand side to move forward into the middle school campus. Norris Middle School, I would say about halfway complete. This campus is really broken into 3 significant phases, and the second one in the academic area is scheduled to be completed over winter break. So I believe they have about 30 to 40 different classrooms moving out around again over the winter break. Another nod to the operations team to make all that happen for the kiddos. But ultimately, what you see here on the right-hand side is there's a large addition that infills the academic wing to kind of the auditorium. That'll be a new media center along with some classrooms. And then in the lower right-hand side, there's a south addition. That's a safe area that's being constructed. That's primarily classrooms, and then there's a teacher planning room in there as well. The photos on the left-hand side are the gym space that's slowly being modernized and converted over. And then also a photo of a topping off ceremony that was hosted there on the campus. Bryan High School, just a couple of quick things. Bryan High is really 3 kind of projects in one. There's a component that is the bond program, which is an auxiliary gym and a couple multi-purpose classrooms. In addition to that, historically, many folks felt like the Bryan front entry needed to be moved to the south. So this work will also move the entry or the main entrance point for students and public to that south elevation. In the photo on the left-hand side, it's the upper image to the far right. There'll be a new canopy placed there, of course, with signage so that it's clear and distinct. The principal and the administration will move down kind of into that south area. That allows the existing administration to be repurposed into counselors. And then the counselors area is going to be actually converted into a couple of classrooms. So we'll have some opportunity to remove some existing portables at this site just by reconfiguring some of the space. That's all, related to the bond work. There's also some additional work that's going to be performed as part of their transportation, distribution, and logistics, their TDL program. That's grant funded. And then the urban ag program is also going to get some renovated spaces and some expansion. There's a greenhouse plan to be built on this site as well. So lots of different projects kind of happening at Bryan. They'll all follow the same timeline. Similar philosophy as Boys and Girls Club. If the bond's going to be there doing significant work, is there opportunity to couple these other projects in, and we've been successful in that. Burke High, just a quick update. On the left-hand side, it's not a whole lot necessary to look at, but it's pretty significant for the students and their schedule. One of the challenges at Burke, I believe they had 5 lunch periods because of their current student population, and we really tried to figure out what was the best way to just get that to 4, which is still a challenge, but much more reasonable. And we were able to add the additional capacity in the cafeteria space to do that with some perimeter counter seating, and then we also expanded the cafeteria to accomplish that as well. On the right-hand side, you can see the excavation that occurred that was necessary for the auxiliary gym. So the auxiliary gym is really on the main level of this addition that's being constructed, and the lower level is primarily band and then vocal music. And then the result of band and vocal music moving out allows a new kind of business area to be constructed along with the teacher planning center, and also provided the art space some additional expansion. So again, kind of that ripple effect of work that allows some repurposing of the existing spaces as well. North High, of course, on the left-hand side is the new front entry, looking in initially or from the exterior, and then below that is looking out through the entry to the south. The other images there are some spaces that are in the new admin area that are directly adjacent to the new entry, of course. New auditorium seating, and then there's an image also of the auxiliary gym that was constructed. The final project we have for you this evening is J.P. Lord, another project that's rapidly moving forward. On the first photo you have there is a pool. I think we've talked about this a couple times, but there is a group that really provided a lot of care of the kiddos that were at J.P. Lord when it was initially constructed for polio patients, and they really wanted to try to help the district provide anything and everything they can for the kiddos that are at J.P. Lord. So they donated dollars to help fund this pool here. It adjusts, it raises and lowers depending on the student need, if you will, from a immersion of water perspective. So that's being constructed. Of course, the upper photo is a photo of one of the existing restrooms, kind of antiquated. Adjacencies are somewhat challenging. The lower image is a modern restroom, and one of the things that there looks like there's kind of a line in the ceiling in all of the restrooms, and then I believe in all of the classrooms and other locations throughout the facilities. Throughout this facility, lifts were put in, and they're part of the physical structure. They still will utilize mobile lifts as necessary, but this is a significant benefit for the staff that are doing a lot of lifting and in some challenging positions as well. So not only were there lifts placed in many locations of this facility, but also structural kind of access points for different swings and different apparatuses that the kiddos here at this site can really maximize the use of. Upper right hand is canopy. It's a cover drop off, again, keeping the kiddos out of the elements as they're dropped off. And the lower right hand photo is a baseball field. So on the play field side of it, of course, it needs to be fully accessible. So this is a paved area. It's striped as a baseball field, and they're a little bit hard to see in the photo, but there's a couple of covered dugout areas as well. So again, really gives the kiddos a good opportunity to get outside at this location. Just real quick, Brett mentioned a dashboard. I'm not going to go into the total details of everything, but ultimately we a couple years ago put together a website. We wanted to make sure we were trying to find ways to communicate financial information, project status, etc. Over the last couple of months, we've been working with communications and the folks in IT on migrating some of that data over into Tableau and making it a little bit more interactive, so you can click and filter rather than just looking at static information. So if you go to the OPS bond website now and you still go over to school, it used to say schools, now it says school dashboard. If you click that, it's going to take you into Tableau or give you a Tableau screen. All of the same information is there. It's going to look a little bit more like this. Again, it gives you the ability to filter by project or multiple projects to look at, so you're not necessarily having to click from project to project to project. You can click just to filter. So financial information's on there. One of the other things that we kind of moved to the front page of that was the economic inclusion information. We always knew it was a great program, but it was kind of buried in all the CBOC reports. This brings it up to really the front and center and gives a good opportunity for folks to see that information. So really an updated way of communicating project-specific schedule and financial information. Just a few more slides. One of the big things that the district, and I think many of you folks have been able to share into, of course, are the successful projects. So there has been a significant wave of ribbon cuttings and celebrations with the campuses. All of the events that I've had the honor of really attending, there's been great community support, lots of smiling, good stories about the process, definitely some challenges, but that always comes with these types of projects. So just wanted the board to be able to see and kind of gloat on some of these as well. This is a result of all the hard work here and approvals and decisions on what projects are included and different things like that. So many of those over the past several months, and I just wanted to provide a quick photo synopsis of that. I mentioned the topping out ceremony. Bell Ryan, Norris, and Western Hill all participated in those, and the kiddos really, I think, got a lot of enjoyment about signing the beam and having it placed in part of the structure. And then, of course, not only we're doing ribbon cuttings, but also groundbreakings for future projects. So really kind of both ends of the spectrum over this past several months and throughout the summer. That's it. And now we're going to go through all of the line by line. No, I'm just kidding. Are there any questions for myself or?
Yeah, like the last 3 or 4 slides or so were just pictures, so.
Yeah,
you did
no,
great.
I mean, again, Mr. Evans can probably speak to it as well, but the turnout at the events and just the excitement to get into the renovated facility, I'm sure some of it's just the excitement to be done with construction, and we definitely understand that and respect it. Our goal is to return the facility as fast as we can, back to the kiddos for full use, and just a lot of smiles and folks walking around and kind of taking in all of the hard work was really nice. Worked with a lot of wonderful principals and other staff, and I think it gives them a moment to really reflect on that too when those events happen. So,
All right, board members, questions, comments? Mr. Scanlon?
Thank you. I would just like to encourage the district and Jacobs to help as we move forward and start to talk about in more depth the phase 2. In this first phase, there were a lot of bond money and also private money that, or not private, but money that came from other sources. Like with J.P. Lord, a large portion of that was paid, through an agreement with UNMC. So I just would encourage the administration and Jacobs to have that information available to board members and to the community. So if you're approached and they say, well, you guys, budgeted X number of millions of dollars for J.P. Lord and you spent this, you can say, well, yeah, this was bond money, this was proceeds from UNMC and an agreement. And a lot of the Boys and Girls Club that, as we were doing or are doing construction on sites, we look to utilize, try to combine those projects so we would disrupt the school as little as possible, but yet still maximize community contributions and bond proceeds. So I think that would be helpful, just because, a lot of rumors and
yeah, we can create a little
get
fact
put out
sheet on
there.
that. That would be beneficial. All the reports related to the bond, we've always reported to the 421 to make sure there was no, well, now why is the referendum 438? Well, it's private fund and this and that. So we've kept all of that out of there. Premiums kept out of it, interest, so, but we can easily create kind of a fact sheet of those private donations or different funding sources and what they were utilized for pretty succinctly, I think. So if I can work with Mr. Ray and get some information back to the board.
Mr. Perlman?
I'm looking at page 6 here of the presentation. Can you tell me, and if you need a few days to compile this, that's completely understandable, but how many small and emerging businesses have participated? Just
I can get you 60.
Okay.
Maybe 60 or 70. And what we found really in the small emerging businesses over the years is initially there was a lot of volume of participants, if you will, but not a lot of capacity with all of those participants. So even though we've seen, maybe at some of the events historically we'd have 35 and now we're getting 25 those 25 businesses have real capacity, they can do work, they have relationships with the contractors, so from an overall input perspective, it's equal to or more than what we thought we started with, if you will. And that's one of the big challenges initially working with small businesses, who has true capacity to do stuff. And I think we've really found, the sweet spot of those businesses, frankly.
And out of those small and emerging businesses who have participated so far, if you took the top 5 of those, and this again may take some time, if you took the top 5, what part of that $27.5 million went to those top 5 small and emerging businesses?
I'd have to get some information for you. I would say between 25 and 50% maybe, and that might be a bit generous. Some of the small businesses, are doing $1 million roof package. Some of the small businesses are doing 50,000, some are doing 5. It varies so much. But again, all of that information I have in the CVOC reports, I can easily identify kind of the top 5 and what their volume is.
I appreciate it. The only reason I ask is because there was, I've heard of situations where 75% went to 1 or 2 companies, and I know everyone wants to avoid that situation, so just wanted to ask the question.
Mr. Scanlon.
I will say on that topic, some of it does get skewed because if you're a SCB contractor and you're the general contractor, you get credit for $1.5 million for the overall project, but you're not. That company's not self-performing all those tasks, so it can get skewed some. But I will say one thing that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, dollar values that are shown here do not include like the Jacobs Academy, the training that went on that was very unique to this bond that I think helped quite a few SCB companies that they were able to navigate through the contracting process and get more into a commercial side of things rather than residential, and to do it with getting bonding and getting assistance with that. And that was at the beginning there was a strong emphasis on that, and then that I think probably has a greater impact than the actual contract dollar amounts, because trying to help set up companies so they're sustainable, not for future bonds, but just for future work. So I think that's something that you have to also take a look at in addition to dollar amounts.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's always good to see the updates, and it's nice to see the progress of where we're starting with, moving dirt around to actually having buildings that we're going to have students moving into in January, which is very, very exciting. We'll move on to our last information item, which is J2C, Committees of the Board update, which we had moved from our December 4th meeting to today. Before we get into the committees, we'll do kind of an officer team update. On our consent agenda tonight, we did accept Ms. Williams' resignation from the board, and so we will be posting that position tomorrow. We'll be posting that through January 2nd, so have about a 2.5 to 3 week application window, because we'll have staff back here on the 3rd to review, verify that people who apply live in the district, and meet the qualifications, and then we will conduct interviews on our January 8th meeting date. And as the officer team, we will be following up with everyone to solicit input on what those interviews will look like. So please, board members, be watching for those emails and phone calls, and for the general public, be watching for that to be posted tomorrow. We will get started in our committees. First up is Budget and Audit, and Mrs. Gotti.
So we heard the audit report tonight, and we also heard from the Nebraska Investment Officer. I want to reiterate what Mr. Evans said, and it'll kind of tie in when we get to legislative too from my comments in the legislature on Friday. I'll give a bit of update on that at that point. But what I would like to say is that as a board, we're very aware of what is happening, and we want to work with the administration to ensure that everyone is well informed and that we work through this next year's budget process in a thoughtful manner. So as Mr. Evans said, we will be putting together a committee that will have community members as well as district staff and representatives that Mr. Evans will work on himself with his team.